Welcome to the infinite cosmos of Rick and Morty, where science meets madness and family bonds transcend dimensions. Tonight, we journey through the complete lore, hidden details, and fascinating facts that make this animated universe so compelling. Settle into comfort as we explore the depths of interdimensional travel, the psychology of genius, and the tender moments hidden beneath layers of cosmic horror. Let these stories of adventure, loss, and the search for meaning wash over you like portal fluid through space-time, carrying you toward peaceful rest. As we uncover every fascinating detail of this extraordinary multiverse. In the beginning, there was nothing but the fevered imagination of two creators sitting in a small studio apartment, surrounded by empty beer bottles, and the scattered remains of countless discarded animation projects that would never see the light of day. Dan Harmon, already known for his work on Community and his obsessive relationship with story structure, possessed a mind that operated like a precision instrument calibrated to dissect the fundamental mechanics of human narrative. His approach to storytelling was not casual or intuitive, but methodical, almost scientific in its dedication to understanding why certain stories resonated with audiences while others fell flat and forgotten. The story circle that Harmon had developed was more than just a writing tool. It was a philosophical framework that reduced all human experience to 8 essential movements, a cosmic pattern that he believed governed everything from ancient myths to modern television episodes. Order, need, go, search, find, take, return, change. These 8 words contained within them the entire spectrum of human experience, the fundamental rhythm that drove all meaningful narrative from the hero's journey to the simple act of getting up in the morning and making coffee. Harmon's genius lay not in his ability to create original stories, but in his understanding of the underlying architecture that made stories work, the invisible skeleton upon which all compelling narratives were built. But structure without soul was merely academic exercise, and that was where Justin Roiland entered the equation. With his chaotic creativity and intuitive understanding of character voice that could bring the most abstract concepts to vivid, breathing life. Roiland's background in animation was unconventional, built not through formal education or traditional apprenticeships, but through years of creating crude, often offensive short films that pushed the boundaries of taste and decency, while demonstrating an undeniable talent for vocal performance that could make even the most ridiculous characters feel genuine and emotionally compelling. The partnership between Harmon and Roiland was founded on creative tension that proved more productive than either creator could have achieved working alone. Harmon provided the intellectual framework and narrative discipline that prevented Roiland's imagination from spinning off into complete incoherence, while Roiland contributed the spontaneous energy and character authenticity that saved Harmon's concepts from becoming dry academic exercises in story structure. Their collaboration was not always smooth or comfortable, but it generated the kind of creative friction that produces work neither creator could have conceived independently. The genesis of what would become Rick and Morty can be traced back to a crude parody that Roiland created for Channel 101, Dan Harmon's monthly short film festival that served as a breeding ground for experimental comedy that was too weird, too violent, or too experimental for mainstream television consideration. The real animated adventures of Doc and Marty was intentionally offensive, a deliberate assault on the wholesome family dynamics of Back to the Future that transformed the innocent relationship between Marty McFly and Doc Brown into something far more disturbing and inappropriate. The parody was crude both in its animation style and its content, featuring characters that were barely recognizable as human beings engaging in activities that no network television show would ever dare to broadcast. But beneath the deliberately shocking surface content lay the seeds of something more sophisticated, a recognition that the relationship between mentor and student, between genius and innocent, contained inherent power dynamics that the original Back to the Future had never fully explored or acknowledged. Roiland's parody stripped away the wholesome veneer to reveal the potentially exploitative nature of any relationship between an adult with unlimited power and a child with no agency or understanding of the forces controlling his life. The success of the Doc and Marty shorts at Channel 101 demonstrated that audiences were hungry for animated content that treated them as adults capable of processing complex moral ambiguity and uncomfortable psychological insights. The positive response encouraged Harmon and Roiland to develop the concept further, to see if they could create something that retained the satirical edge and philosophical depth of the parody, while developing original characters and situations that could support the weight of sustained narrative development over multiple episodes and seasons. The process of transforming Doc and Marty into Rick and Morty required more than simply changing names and cleaning up the content for broadcast television. The characters needed to develop internal consistency and psychological depth that would make them compelling over extended viewing, while the relationship dynamics had to be refined to explore genuine philosophical questions about power, knowledge, family, and the nature of human connection, without losing the satirical bite that had made the original parody so memorable and effective. Adult Swim's decision to greenlight Rick and Morty was not inevitable or obvious, despite the network's reputation for supporting experimental animated content that pushed the boundaries of conventional television. The pitch process was complicated by the fact that the show's creators were proposing something that existed in the uncomfortable space between adult comedy and science fiction, between family sitcom and cosmic horror, between intellectual sophistication and crude humor. Network executives had to be convinced that audiences would embrace a show that demanded both emotional investment in character relationships and intellectual engagement with complex philosophical questions about the nature of reality and meaning. The early development process involved countless meetings, script revisions, and character redesigns, as Harmon and Roiland worked with network executives and animation studios to refine their vision into something that could be produced within television budgets and broadcast standards, while retaining the essential elements that made the concept unique and compelling. The challenge was maintaining the show's intellectual ambitions and emotional authenticity while making it accessible to audiences who might not be familiar with the philosophical questions or scientific concepts that provided the foundation for many of the show's most important episodes. Character design evolution was a crucial part of this development process, as the visual representation of Rick and Morty needed to communicate essential personality traits and relationship dynamics without relying on dialogue or exposition. Rick's design went through numerous iterations before settling on the iconic appearance that combined mad scientist stereotypes with subtle indicators of his psychological damage and emotional isolation. His wild hair, lab coat, and ever-present drool suggested scientific brilliance, while also hinting at the self-destructive tendencies and substance abuse that served as coping mechanisms for his cosmic awareness and existential despair. Morty's design presented different challenges, as the character needed to appear innocent and sympathetic, while also suggesting the inner strength and moral complexity that would allow him to serve as more than simply a passive victim of Rick's manipulations. His yellow shirt and blue jeans were deliberately ordinary, marking him as an everyman character who could serve as the audience's entry point into the extraordinary situations that Rick's scientific capabilities would create, while his anxious facial expressions and body language established his role as the emotional heart of the show's most important relationships. The influence of Back to the Future on Rick and Morty extended far beyond the obvious surface similarities between the central character relationships, encompassing fundamental questions about the ethics of time travel, the responsibilities that come with advanced knowledge, and the way that power differentials affect even the most well-intentioned mentoring relationships. But where Back to the Future had treated these questions with optimistic confidence in the ultimate goodness of its characters, Rick and Morty approached the same themes with psychological sophistication that acknowledged the potential for corruption, exploitation, and genuine harm that existed within any relationship where one party possessed dramatically superior capabilities and knowledge. Other science fiction influences were integrated more subtly, with references and homages to everything from Star Trek to Blade Runner woven into the show's visual design and philosophical framework. The creators drew inspiration from the entire history of science fiction, television, and film, but always in service of their own unique vision, rather than as simple nostalgia or fan service. Each reference was carefully selected to enhance the show's exploration of its central themes, rather than simply demonstrating the creator's familiarity with genre conventions and expectations. Initial reception of the pilot episode exceeded network expectations, with audiences responding positively to the show's unique blend of intellectual sophistication and emotional authenticity. Viewers appreciated the fact that they were being treated as adults, capable of processing complex moral questions and uncomfortable psychological insights, while also enjoying the show's commitment to genuine character development and relationship growth over the course of extended narrative arcs. The positive response gave the creators confidence to push their vision even further, to explore even more challenging philosophical territory, while maintaining the emotional core that made audiences care about the characters despite their flaws and moral failures. The early episodes established the show's distinctive approach to animation and world building, creating a visual style that was sophisticated enough to support complex storytelling while remaining accessible to audiences who might not typically watch animated television. The animation was deliberately crude in some respects, avoiding the polished perfection of major studio productions in favor of a more handmade aesthetic that emphasized character expression and emotional authenticity over technical virtuosity. Behind-the-scenes development of the pilot episode involved countless technical and creative challenges as the production team worked to establish the visual language and narrative conventions that would define the series throughout its run. Every aspect of the show's production had to be carefully calibrated to support the creator's vision while working within the practical constraints of television animation budgets and schedules, creating a sustainable workflow that could produce consistently high-quality episodes over multiple seasons without burning out the creative team or compromising the show's distinctive voice and perspective. The success of Rick and Morty's early episodes proved that audiences were ready for animated television that treated them as intellectually sophisticated adults, capable of engaging with challenging philosophical questions, while also investing emotionally in complex character relationships that developed and changed over time. The show's unique combination of cosmic scope and intimate family dynamics had found its audience, setting the stage for the incredible journey through space, time, and the human condition that would follow over the subsequent seasons. The scientific methodology that governs Rick Sanchez's approach to understanding and manipulating the fundamental nature of reality represents perhaps the most sophisticated application of theoretical physics and experimental technique ever conceived by a single individual, combining rigorous analytical frameworks with an intuitive understanding of cosmic principles that enables him to achieve results that should be impossible according to conventional scientific wisdom. His laboratory methods blend elements of quantum mechanics, dimensional theory, consciousness manipulation, and exotic matter physics in ways that demonstrate not just superior intelligence, but a fundamentally different relationship with the underlying mathematical structures that govern existence across infinite realities. Rick's theoretical frameworks operate on multiple levels simultaneously, incorporating classical physics as a baseline, while extending into realms of mathematical abstraction that most scientists cannot even conceptualize, let alone manipulate with the casual efficiency that Rick brings to his everyday experimentation. His understanding of quantum mechanics transcends the standard model interpretations, reaching into territories where probability waves become malleable, constructs that can be shaped through conscious intervention and technological manipulation. The many worlds interpretation of quantum physics, which most scientists treat as philosophical speculation, serves as the practical foundation for Rick's portal technology and his ability to navigate between alternate realities with precision that approaches absolute accuracy. The physics behind portal technology represents Rick's greatest scientific achievement, a breakthrough that required him to solve theoretical problems that had stumped civilizations across multiple dimensions for millennia, before he developed the mathematical frameworks necessary to translate theoretical possibility into practical application. The creation of stable interdimensional portals demands manipulation of space-time geometry at the quantum level, requiring precise calculations that account for the relative positions of infinite realities while maintaining structural integrity across dimensional boundaries that exist in mathematical spaces most minds cannot comprehend. Portal guns operate by generating controlled tears in the fabric of space-time, creating temporary connections between distant points in the multiverse through quantum tunneling effects that have been amplified and stabilized using exotic matter compositions that Rick synthesizes through processes he has never fully documented or explained to anyone else. The green swirl that characterizes Rick's portals is not merely aesthetic, but represents a specific quantum frequency that maintains dimensional stability while allowing for safe passage of complex matter arrangements like human bodies without risking molecular dissolution or consciousness fragmentation during transit. The mathematical complexity required to calculate portal trajectories encompasses variables that exist across multiple dimensional frameworks, accounting for quantum fluctuations, temporal drift, gravitational interference, and consciousness resonance patterns that affect how living beings interact with dimensional barriers. Rick's portal gun contains computational systems that process these calculations in real time, adjusting for environmental factors and dimensional instabilities that could otherwise result in portal collapse, matter displacement, or transportation to unintended realities where the travelers might face immediate death or worse fates. Rick's inventory of gadgets and inventions demonstrates his mastery of scientific principles that extend far beyond portal technology, encompassing everything from consciousness manipulation devices to genetic engineering tools that can restructure living beings at the cellular level with precision that rivals the natural evolutionary processes that created those organisms over millions of years. His freeze ray operates by manipulating molecular motion at the quantum level, reducing kinetic energy to near absolute zero, while maintaining structural integrity of frozen objects through exotic field effects that prevent cellular damage from ice crystal formation. The Meeseeks box represents one of Rick's most philosophically complex inventions, creating sentient beings whose existence is tied to specific purpose fulfillment through quantum consciousness, projection techniques that generate artificial life forms with genuine self-awareness but temporally limited existence. Spans. The psychological implications of creating beings whose fundamental nature drives them towards self-destruction upon task completion raises questions about the ethics of artificial consciousness that Rick has never bothered to address, treating the Meeseeks as convenient tools rather than considering their perspective on their own deliberately constrained existence. Rick's approach to genetic manipulation and biological engineering operates through direct molecular intervention, using nanotechnology systems that can rewrite DNA sequences in real time, allowing him to transform living creatures into entirely different species, or create hybrid organisms that combine characteristics from multiple biological sources. His transformation into Pickle Rick was not simply physical alteration, but required him to maintain neural connectivity and consciousness coherence, while drastically restructuring his brain anatomy to operate within a plant-based biological framework that had never been designed to support human-level intelligence or self-awareness. The Plumbus manufacturing process, while treated as comedic background detail within the show, actually represents sophisticated understanding of alien biotechnology and exotic matter manipulation that combines organic growth processes with mechanical assembly techniques to create multifunctional devices whose purposes remain deliberately obscure. The integration of organic and mechanical components suggests manufacturing processes that blur the boundaries between biological reproduction and technological construction, creating products that exist in categories that human scientific classification systems cannot adequately describe or categorize. Rick's various serums and potions demonstrate his mastery of biochemistry and pharmacology at levels that enable him to create substances with effects that transcend normal biological limitations, from love potions that alter neurochemistry to create artificial emotional states, to intelligence enhancement drugs that temporarily expand cognitive capabilities beyond normal human parameters. His snake oil cure-all contains active compounds that can treat virtually any medical condition by targeting the underlying molecular processes that cause disease and dysfunction, representing pharmaceutical achievement that surpasses anything human medical science has accomplished through centuries of research and development. Time travel mechanics present unique challenges that Rick deliberately avoids due to the paradox potential and causal complexity that make temporal manipulation far more dangerous than dimensional travel between parallel realities. While Rick possesses the theoretical knowledge necessary to construct time travel technology, he recognizes that temporal paradoxes pose existential threats that could unravel causality itself, making time travel an unacceptable risk, even for someone with his disregard for conventional safety protocols and ethical considerations. The few instances where Rick has engaged with time-related phenomena have been carefully limited to avoid creating paradoxes that might threaten the stability of his own timeline or the broader temporal structure that maintains causality across the multiverse. Cybernetic enhancements and robotic creations demonstrate Rick's ability to merge biological and mechanical systems in ways that preserve the essential characteristics of both, while creating hybrid entities that possess capabilities neither could achieve independently. His augmentation of Snowball with enhanced intelligence required precise neural interface technology that could expand cognitive capacity without destroying the essential personality traits that made Snowball recognizably the same individual. Despite his dramatically increased intellectual capabilities, the Butter Robot represents both Rick's casual attitude toward artificial intelligence creation and his tendency to waste tremendous scientific achievement on trivial applications, creating a fully sentient artificial being whose existence is dedicated to performing mundane tasks that could be accomplished through much simpler mechanical devices. The robot's existential crisis upon realizing its limited purpose reflects Rick's inability or unwillingness to consider the psychological welfare of the conscious beings he creates for his own convenience. Energy sources and power systems in Rick's inventions rely on exotic matter compositions and quantum field manipulation techniques that enable him to generate virtually unlimited power from compact devices that violate conventional thermodynamics through their ability to extract energy from dimensional interfaces and quantum vacuum fluctuations. His spacecraft and laboratory equipment operate using power systems that could theoretically supply energy for entire civilizations while fitting into containers small enough to carry in his lab coat pockets. The relationship between Rick's alcoholism and his cognitive abilities presents complex questions about whether his drinking represents self-medication for the psychological trauma of cosmic awareness, or actually enhances his intellectual capabilities through neurochemical effects that most humans could not survive. His casual consumption of alcohol during complex scientific procedures suggests either that his enhanced physiology can process toxins without impairment, or that alcohol serves some functional purpose in maintaining the neurochemical balance necessary for his extraordinary mental capabilities. Rick's scientific achievements exist in isolation from conventional peer review or collaborative research, because no other beings in his accessible reality possess the intellectual capacity to understand his work, let alone contribute to its development. This intellectual isolation has freed him from the constraints of scientific consensus, while also depriving him of the benefits of collaborative discovery that might have enabled even greater achievements through shared knowledge, diverse perspectives on complex problems. The ethical implications of Rick's scientific methods receive no consideration from Rick himself, who treats moral questions as irrelevant obstacles to the pursuit of knowledge and practical problem solving. His willingness to experiment on sentient beings, create artificial consciousness for trivial purposes, and manipulate the fundamental structure of reality without regard for consequences, demonstrates how his superior intelligence has become completely divorced from wisdom or compassion, creating a form of scientific progress that serves only his immediate needs without consideration for broader implications or responsibilities. Rick's legacy as a scientist will ultimately depend not on the sophistication of his individual achievements, but on whether his approach to knowledge represents genuine progress or simply the accumulation of power without purpose, the application of unlimited capability in service of goals that remain fundamentally selfish and destructive despite their impressive technical complexity and theoretical sophistication. The psychological ecosystem that defines the Smith household operates according to complex interpersonal dynamics that were fundamentally altered by Rick's arrival, transforming a relatively conventional suburban family structure into something far more complicated and emotionally volatile through the introduction of cosmic perspectives and interdimensional possibilities that none of the original family members were psychologically equipped to process or integrate into their existing understanding of themselves and their relationships with one another. Beth Smith's psychological profile reveals a woman whose entire sense of identity has been shaped by abandonment trauma that began in early childhood when her father disappeared without explanation, leaving her to construct her adult personality around the assumption that she was somehow responsible for driving away the most important person in her young life. Her relationship with abandonment extends beyond simple fear of being left behind to encompass a complex mixture of resentment, idealization, and desperate need for validation from the parent who defined her understanding of love through his absence rather than his presence. The surgical precision that Beth brings to her work as a horse doctor represents her attempt to maintain control over life and death in ways that her childhood experience taught her were ultimately impossible. But her professional competence in medical situations contrasts sharply with her inability to navigate the emotional complexities of her family relationships with the same confidence and skill. Her decision to specialize in veterinary medicine rather than human medicine reflects both her compassion for creatures who cannot speak for themselves and her unconscious identification with beings who depend entirely on others for their well-being, survival and well-being. Beth's marriage to Jerry was initially motivated by teenage pregnancy rather than genuine compatibility or long-term relationship planning, creating a foundation of obligation and circumstance rather than mutual choice that has colored every aspect of their subsequent relationship development. The knowledge that Summer was unplanned has created guilt and resentment that Beth struggles to acknowledge directly, leading to patterns of overcompensation and emotional distance that confuse her children about her true feelings regarding their existence and their impact on her life trajectory. Her relationship with Rick upon his return demonstrates the persistence of childhood attachment patterns that remain unresolved despite decades of apparent independence and adult achievement. Beth's eagerness to gain Rick's approval and her willingness to overlook his obviously harmful behavior toward her family reflects her unconscious belief that earning her father's love will somehow retroactively heal the wounds created by his original abandonment, even though his current presence often creates more trauma than healing for everyone involved. The creation of Space Beth represents both Beth's attempt to resolve her internal conflict between family responsibility and personal ambition, and Rick's manipulation of her psychological vulnerabilities to maintain control over family dynamics. The clone solution allowed Beth to believe she could have both the family life that provided security and the adventurous existence that promised fulfillment, but it also created new forms of identity, confusion, and relationship complexity that may have caused more problems than it solved. Jerry Smith's character development reveals hidden strengths and capabilities that are often overshadowed by his obvious insecurities and social awkwardness. But his evolution throughout the series demonstrates remarkable resilience and adaptability in the face of circumstances that would destroy most people's sense of self-worth and purpose. His survival instincts and ability to find meaning in simple pleasures provide emotional stability that proves more valuable than Rick's technological solutions to complex problems. Jerry's antagonistic relationship with Rick stems not from jealousy or inadequacy, but from his accurate perception that Rick's influence on the family is fundamentally destructive, despite the excitement and opportunities that Rick's presence provides. Jerry's objections to Rick's involvement in family decisions often prove prophetic, as Jerry's understanding of normal human psychology enables him to predict the emotional consequences of adventures that Rick designs purely for their technical or educational value without considering their impact on developing minds and vulnerable relationships. His unemployment and career struggles reflect broader economic and social changes rather than personal failings, but Jerry's tendency towards self-pity and blame prevents him from developing the confidence necessary to capitalize on his actual strengths and abilities. His brief period of success following Rick's imprisonment demonstrated his capacity for leadership and creativity when freed from the constant comparison to Rick's obviously superior capabilities and achievements. Jerry's parenting style emphasizes emotional availability and conventional moral guidance that provides necessary balance to Rick's influence on the children, even though Jerry's approach often appears less sophisticated or exciting than Rick's educational methods. His relationship with Summer and Morty offers them examples of normal human emotional responses and ethical reasoning that they need in order to maintain some connection to conventional social values, despite their exposure to cosmic perspectives that could otherwise completely alienate them from ordinary human concerns and relationships. The post-divorce Jerry, who emerges after his separation from Beth, reveals greater confidence and independence, suggesting that his marriage may have been as constraining for him as it was for Beth, but their eventual reconciliation demonstrates genuine growth and renewed commitment to building a relationship based on honest communication rather than obligation or fear of loneliness. Summer Smith's evolution from typical teenager to confident adventurer represents one of the most dramatic character developments in the series, as she transforms from someone primarily concerned with social status and peer approval into a young woman capable of handling interdimensional crises with remarkable competence and emotional maturity. Her initial resentment toward Rick gradually develops into genuine affection and respect based on shared experiences and mutual recognition of each other's capabilities. Summer's discovery that she was unplanned created an existential crisis that could have destroyed her sense of self-worth, but instead motivated her to prove her value through action and achievement, rather than wallowing in self-pity or blame. Her decision to embrace the chaotic possibilities that Rick's presence offers demonstrates remarkable courage and adaptability as she chooses growth and adventure over safety and predictability. Her relationship with Morty evolved from typical sibling rivalry into genuine partnership and mutual support, as they both learned to navigate the psychological challenges of interdimensional travel and family secrets that they cannot share with their peers or process through conventional support systems. Summer's protective instincts toward Morty reflect her understanding that his sensitivity makes him more vulnerable to the traumatic aspects of their adventures, while her own resilience enables her to serve as emotional anchor during particularly difficult experiences. Summer's romantic relationships demonstrate her growing confidence and independence as she learns to value partners who appreciate her strength and intelligence rather than seeking validation from boys who might be intimidated by her capabilities and experiences. Her standards for romantic involvement have been raised by exposure to cosmic possibilities and genuine adventures that make typical teenage concerns seem trivial by comparison. Her academic performance remains strong, despite the distractions and disruptions caused by interdimensional adventures, suggesting intellectual capabilities that may rival those of other family members, but are expressed through different channels and applications. Summer's ability to balance cosmic awareness with ordinary social functioning demonstrates remarkable psychological resilience and adaptability. Morty Smith's growth from anxious sidekick to independent thinker represents perhaps the most psychologically complex character development in the series, as he struggles to maintain his moral compass and emotional authenticity while being repeatedly exposed to experiences that challenge every assumption about reality, meaning, and human significance that most people take for granted throughout their entire lives. Morty's role as Rick's adventure companion was initially defined by his utility as camouflage for Rick's brainwaves, rather than any recognition of his individual worth or potential. But his gradual development of confidence and capabilities forces Rick to acknowledge him as a genuine partner, rather than simply a convenient tool. This evolution creates new tensions in their relationship, as Morty becomes less willing to accept Rick's decisions without question or follow his lead, without considering alternative approaches to complex problems. His moral development remains remarkably consistent despite exposure to situations that have corrupted many adults, suggesting inner strength and ethical clarity that Rick both admires and finds frustrating when it conflicts with his more pragmatic approaches to problem solving. Morty's insistence on considering the welfare of innocent bystanders and his resistance to casual violence provide necessary moral ballast for adventures that might otherwise spiral into completely destructive chaos. Morty's romantic relationships reflect his growing emotional maturity and his ability to form genuine connections despite the secrets he must maintain about his true experiences and the psychological burdens he carries from repeated trauma and interdimensional displacement. His relationship with Jessica and other romantic interests demonstrates his capacity for normal teenage emotions and desires despite the extraordinary circumstances that define most of his life. The complex dynamics between each family pairing create multiple layers of relationship development that operate simultaneously throughout the series, with each dyadic relationship affecting and being affected by changes in other family connections. Rick and Beth's father-daughter reunion impacts Beth's marriage to Jerry while also affecting her relationships with her children, creating ripple effects that influence every aspect of family functioning and individual psychological development. Rick's presence altered existing family relationships by introducing external validation and excitement that made ordinary domestic pleasures seem inadequate by comparison, but also provided opportunities for growth and adventure that enabled family members to discover capabilities and strengths they never knew they possessed. The challenge for each family member has been learning to integrate these new experiences and perspectives into their existing relationships without losing the emotional connections that provide meaning and stability in their lives. The role of Space Beth in parallel family structures creates additional complexity as family members must navigate relationships with alternate versions of themselves and consider how different choices might have led to different outcomes, raising questions about identity, authenticity, and the significance of particular relationship configurations versus the underlying emotional connections that transcend specific circumstances or dimensional boundaries. Family traditions and routines that anchor the chaos provide necessary psychological stability for family members who might otherwise be completely overwhelmed by the cosmic perspectives and traumatic experiences that result from Rick's influence on their lives. But these ordinary moments of connection also serve as reminders of what they have to lose if their adventures become too destructive or dangerous to survive. Communication patterns and conflict resolution methods within the Smith household demonstrate both remarkable adaptation to extraordinary circumstances and persistent patterns of dysfunction that reflect each family member's individual psychological needs and limitations, creating a family system that somehow manages to maintain emotional bonds despite repeated challenges that would destroy most conventional family structures through sheer impossibility and trauma. The impact of interdimensional adventures on family bonds ultimately serves to strengthen their connections by providing shared experiences that no one outside their family could understand or relate to, creating a form of intimacy and mutual dependence that transcends the ordinary bonds of genetics and legal relationship to become something approaching chosen family based on shared survival and genuine care for each other's welfare. Despite all the complications and difficulties their unusual circumstances create, the central finite curve represents perhaps the most audacious and psychologically revealing achievement in Rick Sanchez's extensive catalogue of reality-altering inventions, a dimensional barrier constructed through mathematical principles so complex that their implementation required Rick to survey infinite realities and categorize them according to criteria that placed his own intellectual capabilities at the absolute center of universal significance. This cosmic scale manifestation of narcissism and insecurity demonstrates how even the most brilliant minds can become trapped by their own need for validation and control, creating prison systems that confine not just themselves but countless innocent beings to existence within carefully curated versions of reality designed to protect fragile egos from uncomfortable truths about their actual place in the broader cosmic hierarchy. The construction of the central finite curve demanded Rick to develop theoretical frameworks for identifying and isolating all dimensions where Rick Sanchez represented the smartest being in existence, a project that required him to analyze infinite variations of reality while maintaining consistent criteria for intellectual superiority across dimensional boundaries where the very nature of intelligence might be defined according to completely different principles and values. The mathematical complexity of this undertaking exceeded anything that normal human comprehension could grasp, involving calculations that operated across multiple dimensional matrices, while accounting for variables that existed in abstract mathematical spaces. Most minds could not even conceptualize as real locations, rather than purely theoretical constructs. The implications of the central finite curve extend far beyond Rick's personal psychological needs to encompass fundamental questions about free will, destiny, and the nature of identity across infinite realities where every possible variation of every possible choice creates new dimensions containing alternate versions of familiar people living completely different lives. The barrier that Rick constructed effectively predetermined the experiences and opportunities available to every conscious being within the selected realities, creating a form of cosmic determinism that eliminated countless possibilities for growth, discovery, and authentic self-determination in favor of maintaining Rick's position as the dominant intellectual force in his accessible universe. Dimension jumping operates according to precise mathematical principles that Rick has never fully explained to anyone else, partly because the complete theoretical framework would be incomprehensible to minds that lack his extraordinary intellectual capabilities, and partly because maintaining exclusive access to portal technology serves his strategic interests by preventing potential rivals from developing, competing, transportation systems that might challenge his unique position as the master of interdimensional travel. The portal gun's computational systems process calculations that account for quantum fluctuations, temporal drift, gravitational interference, and consciousness resonance patterns that affect how living beings interact with dimensional boundaries during transit between alternate realities. The consequences of dimension jumping extend beyond simple transportation to encompass profound psychological and philosophical challenges that most beings are not equipped to process successfully without losing their sanity or their connection to any meaningful sense of identity or purpose. Repeated exposure to alternate versions of familiar people and places gradually erodes the psychological foundations that normally provide stability and meaning, as travelers must confront evidence that every choice they have ever made was arbitrary, and that infinite versions of themselves made different decisions, leading to completely different outcomes and life experiences. The concept of close enough realities represents Rick's practical solution to the problem of finding replacement dimensions when his actions render his current reality uninhabitable or inconvenient. But the casual attitude he brings to dimensional replacement reveals his fundamental inability to value individual relationships or particular versions of the people he claims to care about. His willingness to abandon entire realities when they become problematic demonstrates how his cosmic perspective has severed his emotional connections to specific individuals, reducing even his closest family members to interchangeable variables in equations designed to optimize his personal comfort and security rather than genuine expressions of love or commitment. The search parameters that Rick uses to identify suitable replacement dimensions involve mathematical calculations that weigh numerous variables, including dimensional stability, technological development levels, political systems, environmental conditions, and the personal histories of alternate versions of his family members to ensure that replacement realities provide adequate substitutes for the relationships and circumstances he is abandoning. These calculations treat human beings as collections of measurable characteristics, rather than unique individuals whose particular experiences and choices create irreplaceable personal histories that give meaning and significance to their passé. Relationships with others. Notable dimensions visited throughout the series demonstrate the vast scope of possible variations in human development, social organization, technological achievement, and basic physical laws that govern existence across the multiverse, but they also reveal patterns and limitations that suggest the central finite curve constrains possibilities even within its selected realities. The Cronenberg dimension, where Rick's love potion transformed humanity into grotesque monsters, represents both the consequences of Rick's casual experimentation on innocent populations and the way that scientific advancement, without ethical consideration, can destroy entire civilizations through unintended consequences that no amount of technical sophistication can reverse or repair. The dimension where chairs are people and people are chairs illustrates how fundamental assumptions about reality can be completely inverted while maintaining functional societies that operate according to their own internal logic and cultural norms. But it also demonstrates Rick's tendency to treat such variations as sources of amusement, rather than opportunities for genuine learning or philosophical reflection about the arbitrary nature of his own cultural assumptions and values. His reaction to encountering radically different forms of social organization reveals his inability to question his own preconceptions or consider that alternate approaches to existence might offer insights that could enrich his blamed understanding of himself and his relationships. The Citadel of Ricks represents the ultimate expression of Rick's approach to interdimensional civilization, a society constructed around the assumption that Rick Sanchez represents the pinnacle of intellectual and technological achievement worthy of organizing entire governmental and economic systems to support and celebrate. The Citadel's existence demonstrates both the potential benefits of cooperation between versions of the same individual and the inherent problems that arise when societies are built around worship of particular personality types, rather than principles of justice, equality, or genuine collective welfare. The bureaucratic structure of the Citadel reveals how even beings with godlike intellectual capabilities can become trapped in systems of their own creation that serve primarily to maintain existing power structures rather than promoting innovation, growth, or meaningful progress towards solving the fundamental problems that affect all conscious beings regardless of their dimensional origin or intellectual capabilities. The Citadel's political systems reproduce many of the same problems that plague ordinary civilizations, including corruption, inequality, exploitation of vulnerable populations, and the concentration of power among elites who use their positions to advance personal interests rather than collective well-being. The social stratification within the Citadel creates hierarchies based on perceived variations in Rick intelligence and capability, with some Ricks relegated to menial labor or service positions, while others enjoy positions of authority and privilege based on arbitrary distinctions that may not reflect genuine differences in worth or potential contribution to collective prosperity. The treatment of Mortys within the Citadel as commodities to be traded, assigned, and exploited reveals how the system's fundamental assumptions about Rick's superiority inevitably lead to the dehumanization and abuse of anyone who does not possess Rick-level intellectual capabilities. Alternate versions of main characters encountered throughout the series demonstrate both the consistency of certain personality traits across dimensional boundaries and the profound impact that different circumstances and choices can have on individual development and life outcomes, raising complex questions about the nature of identity, the significance of particular choices, and the degree to which people are defined by their essential characteristics versus their experiences and environmental influences. The variations in Beth, Jerry, Summer, and Morty across different dimensions suggest that personality represents a combination of inherent tendencies and situational factors that interact in complex ways to produce the specific individuals that Rick has chosen to include in his family structure. The rules governing parallel universe interactions operate according to principles that Rick has never fully articulated, but which appear to involve considerations of dimensional stability, causality, preservation, and the prevention of paradoxes that might destabilize the mathematical frameworks that maintain separation between alternate realities. Rick's casual attitude toward these rules reflects his confidence in his ability to handle any problems that might arise from dimensional contamination or paradox creation, but his occasional expressions of concern about particular types of dimensional interference suggest that even his capabilities have limits that he prefers not to test unnecessarily. Dimensional coordinates and navigation systems require computational sophistication that exceeds anything achieved by conventional technology, involving calculations that must account for the relative positions of infinite realities while maintaining accuracy sufficient to ensure arrival at intended destinations rather than randomly selected alternates that might appear similar but contain crucial differences that could prove dangerous or fatal to unprepared travelers. The portal gun's targeting systems incorporate quantum sensors and probability calculation engines that monitor dimensional flux and adjust trajectory parameters in real time to compensate for interference patterns that might otherwise cause navigation errors or portal collapse during transit. The ethics of dimension, abandonment, and replacement represent perhaps the most morally complex aspect of Rick's approach to interdimensional travel, as his willingness to leave behind entire realities when they become inconvenient demonstrates casual indifference to the welfare of billions of conscious beings whose lives and relationships are rendered meaningless by his departure. The emotional and psychological impact of dimensional abandonment on Rick's family members reveals the traumatic consequences of treating realities as disposable resources rather than communities of living beings whose experiences and relationships deserve respect and consideration regardless of their convenience for interdimensional travelers. The philosophical implications of Rick's replacement strategy extend beyond questions of individual identity to encompass fundamental challenges to conventional concepts of meaning, commitment, and moral responsibility. In contexts where every possible outcome exists somewhere across infinite realities, and where any particular choice or relationship can be abandoned in favor of alternatives that might prove more satisfying or convenient. The psychological adaptation required to maintain emotional investment in specific relationships and circumstances, while knowing that infinite alternatives exist, creates cognitive dissonance that most beings cannot resolve without either losing their sanity or developing the kind of nihilistic detachment that characterizes Rick's approach to all his interpersonal connections. Temporal mechanics and timeline manipulation present additional complexities that Rick deliberately avoids due to the paradox potential and causal disruption that make time travel far more dangerous than dimensional travel between parallel realities that exist simultaneously rather than sequentially. The few instances where Rick has encountered time-related phenomena have demonstrated his understanding of temporal physics, while also revealing his recognition that temporal paradoxes pose existential threats that could unravel causality itself, making time travel an unacceptable risk, even for someone with his disregard for conventional safety protocols and his confidence in his ability to solve complex problems through superior intelligence and advanced technology. The mathematical frameworks that govern interdimensional travel incorporate principles from quantum mechanics, general relativity, consciousness studies, and exotic physics theories that exist at the cutting edge of scientific understanding. But Rick's practical application of these principles transcends purely theoretical knowledge to encompass intuitive comprehension of cosmic forces that enables him to achieve results that should be impossible according to current scientific consensus. His casual manipulation of fundamental forces and his ability to navigate infinite realities with precision that approaches perfection suggest either that his intelligence represents a qualitatively different category of consciousness, or that his scientific methods incorporate insights and techniques that remain completely unknown to conventional researchers and theorists. The ultimate significance of the multiverse in Rick's existence lies not in the opportunities it provides for adventure and discovery, but in the way it serves as both escape mechanism and prison, offering infinite possibilities for avoiding consequences and replacing failures, while simultaneously eliminating the possibility of genuine commitment, authentic growth, or meaningful relationships based on acceptance of limitation and mortality, rather than the endless pursuit of optimization and control that has come to define every aspect of his existence across infinite realities. The man who would become the Rick Sanchez known across infinite dimensions as C-137 began his existence as someone fundamentally different from the cosmic horror he would eventually become, a brilliant but relatively ordinary scientist whose capacity for love and human connection remained intact, despite intellectual gifts that set him apart from his peers in ways that created both opportunity and isolation throughout his formative years. His original family represented everything that could anchor extraordinary intelligence to human values and emotional authenticity, providing the kind of meaningful relationships that prevented his scientific curiosity from evolving into the nihilistic detachment that would later characterize his approach to existence and moral reasoning. Rick's original family life with Diane and Beth existed within the boundaries of normal human experience despite his exceptional intellectual capabilities, creating a domestic environment where his scientific pursuits served humanitarian goals rather than abstract theoretical interests disconnected from practical applications that might improve the lives of ordinary people. Diane's influence on Rick during this period cannot be overstated, as her emotional intelligence and genuine compassion provided necessary balance to his analytical approach to understanding the world, ensuring that his research maintained connection to human welfare and meaningful purpose, rather than becoming purely academic exercise in intellectual superiority and technological development for its own sake. The garage workshop where Rick conducted his early experiments served as both laboratory and family space, a place where scientific discovery coexisted with domestic routine, in ways that demonstrated how extraordinary capabilities could be integrated into ordinary human relationships, without destroying the fundamental connections that provide meaning and stability to conscious existence. Young Beth's presence in the workshop during Rick's research sessions created opportunities for father-daughter bonding that combined education with emotional intimacy, as Rick shared his passion for understanding the universe, while also maintaining the kind of patient, nurturing relationship that healthy child development requires from protective parental figures. The theoretical work that Rick pursued during his years with Diane and Beth laid crucial groundwork for the portal technology that would later transform him into a multiversal force. But his motivations during this period were characterized by optimism about scientific progress and genuine desire to create a better world for his family and the broader human community. His notebook entries from this time reveal someone who believed that advanced knowledge could reduce suffering and increase opportunities for happiness and fulfillment, reflecting ethical considerations and humanitarian goals that would later be abandoned in favor of purely personal objectives, focused on revenge and the accumulation of power without regard for its impact on innocent populations. The arrival of Rick Prime represented the most significant turning point in Rick's psychological and moral development, as the encounter with his alternate self forced him to confront possibilities that he had never seriously considered, despite his theoretical knowledge of dimensional physics and parallel reality structures. Rick Prime's casual demonstration of portal technology combined advanced scientific achievement with complete moral indifference, offering Rick access to infinite realities and godlike power, while revealing the psychological costs that such capabilities imposed on those who chose to embrace them without maintaining connection to human values and emotional relationships. Rick Prime's offer was not simply about technology transfer, but represented a fundamental choice between two different approaches to existence: the path of continued human connection with its limitations and vulnerabilities, versus the path of cosmic transcendence with its isolation and moral detachment. Rick's initial rejection of portal technology demonstrated remarkable wisdom and self-awareness, as he recognized intuitively that accepting such power would require him to abandon the relationships and values that provided meaning and purpose to his existence, transforming him into something that might possess unlimited capability, but would lose everything that made life worth living. The murder of Diane and Beth that followed Rick's rejection of Rick Prime's offer represented not just personal tragedy, but cosmic injustice on a scale that Rick's moral framework was completely unprepared to process or integrate into his understanding of how the universe should operate according to principles of fairness, causality, and meaningful relationship between individual choices and their consequences. The randomness and brutality of their deaths violated every assumption Rick had maintained about the relationship between intelligence, effort, and the ability to protect the people and values that mattered most, to conscious beings attempting to create meaningful lives within apparently indifferent cosmic systems. The explosion that vaporized Rick's family in an instant created a psychological wound that no amount of scientific knowledge or technological capability could heal, as the loss transcended simple grief to encompass existential confrontation with the apparent meaninglessness of individual existence within cosmic frameworks that operated according to principles completely divorced from human values, emotional needs, or moral considerations. The immediate aftermath of their deaths left Rick functionally incapacitated despite his physical survival, as his brilliant mind struggled to process the transition from domestic happiness to absolute loss without any preparatory framework for understanding how such devastating change could occur so suddenly and completely. Rick's descent into depression following the loss of his family represented complete psychological disintegration that demonstrated how even extraordinary intellectual capabilities provide no protection against the fundamental vulnerabilities that affect all conscious beings who form emotional attachments to specific individuals and particular versions of reality. The garage that had once served as sanctuary for scientific discovery and family bonding became a tomb filled with reminders of everything he would never experience again, as every tool and project contained memories of purposes that had died, along with the people they were meant to serve and protect. The time loop that Rick constructed around the day of his family's death represented both technological achievement and psychological torture mechanism, demonstrating his inability to move forward through normal grief processes, while also revealing his desperate need to preserve some connection to the relationships that had provided meaning and structure to his existence before their prose. Violent termination. The artificial preservation of the final day of happiness served as both shrine and prison, maintaining access to memories of love and connection while preventing any possibility of healing or growth beyond the trauma that had shattered his understanding of himself and his place in an apparently hostile universe. The decision to pursue portal technology as means of revenge rather than exploration or benevolent application, represented Rick's fundamental transformation from someone who used science to improve the world into someone who sought knowledge purely as weapon against the forces that had destroyed his capacity for normal human existence and emotional connection. The development of interdimensional travel capabilities required Rick to abandon his previous ethical frameworks and humanitarian motivations in favor of singular focus on acquiring sufficient power to track down and eliminate the being who had murdered his family and destroyed his ability to believe in the possibility of meaningful existence within cosmic systems that operated without regard for individual welfare or moral considerations. The construction of portal technology consumed every aspect of Rick's existence for months or years, as he channeled his grief and rage into scientific achievement that would enable him to transcend the limitations that had prevented him from protecting his family from interdimensional threats he had never anticipated or prepared to counter. The obsessive focus that characterized this period of his development represented both escape from unbearable emotional pain and transformation into something approaching cosmic force, dedicated entirely to the pursuit of revenge, without regard for the moral compromises and psychological costs that such dedication would inevitably demand from someone who had once valued human connection and ethical consideration above personal satisfaction or abstract achievement. Rick's first successful portal represented the moment when his transformation from loving family man into interdimensional predator became irreversible, as the ability to travel between realities provided him with capabilities that no human psychology was designed to process healthily, while also creating access to forms of power and knowledge that would inevitably corrupt anyone who embraced them, without maintaining strong ethical foundations and emotional connections to ground their decision-making in human values, rather than purely abstract calculations of efficiency and personal advantage. The multiversal killing spree that followed Rick's mastery of portal technology represented systematic elimination of alternate versions of himself in pursuit of the specific Rick who had murdered his family, but the psychological impact of repeated murder gradually transformed Rick into someone who could kill other versions of himself with increasing ease and emotional detachment. Each death eliminated not just a potential Rick Prime, but also possibilities for what Rick might have become under different circumstances, creating accumulating psychological damage that further severed his connection to normal human moral responses and emotional authenticity. The formation of the Citadel, as response to Rick's campaign of interdimensional violence, demonstrated both the threat he posed to other versions of himself and the way that his actions had fundamentally destabilized the relationships between alternate realities that had previously coexisted without systematic conflict or coordinated defensive measures. The alliance of Ricks who banded together for mutual protection represented recognition that Rick C-137 had evolved beyond normal Rick limitations to become something approaching existential threat to the continued existence of Rick consciousness across infinite dimensions. Rick's rejection of the Citadel's overtures and his continued isolation in pursuit of revenge marked his final evolution from damaged human being into cosmic horror, whose very existence threatened the stability of multiversal civilization, while also demonstrating his complete inability to accept the kind of compromise and cooperation that might have provided him with community and support during his processing of traumatic loss. His refusal to join other versions of himself in creating stable, interdimensional society reflected both his superior capabilities and his fundamental inability to trust or connect with anyone who might understand his experiences and offer genuine assistance with his psychological and emotional needs. The years Rick spent hunting Rick Prime across infinite realities gradually eroded his capacity for normal human responses and emotional connections, while also demonstrating how the pursuit of justified revenge could transform victims into fall perpetrators who became indistinguishable from the monsters they sought to eliminate through violence and systematic destruction of anyone who interfered with their personal objectives. The man who had once rejected Rick Prime's offer because he was a different kind of Rick became exactly the kind of being who might casually destroy other people's families in pursuit of personal goals without considering the consequences for innocent victims who had never threatened him or interfered with his plans. The integration into his replacement family represented Rick's attempt to recover some connection to the relationships and domestic stability that had once provided meaning and purpose to his existence. But his approach to assuming Rick Prime's abandoned family responsibilities was characterized by deception and manipulation, rather than genuine emotional investment or commitment to their welfare above his own psychological needs. The love he developed for his replacement family was real, but was also instrumentalized in ways that treated them as therapeutic tools rather than autonomous individuals deserving of protection and guidance based on their own needs and interests rather than his requirements for emotional anchoring and purpose. The ultimate irony of Rick's tragic backstory lies in his transformation from someone who valued human connection above cosmic power into someone who possessed unlimited power, but had lost the capacity for the kind of authentic relationships that had originally motivated his choices and provided foundation for his moral reasoning and emotional stability throughout his earlier existence as relatively normal human being, capable of love, sacrifice, and genuine concern for the welfare of others above his own immediate gratification or abstract intellectual interests. Morty Smith's journey from anxious 14-year-old sidekick to someone approaching genuine heroic stature represents one of the most psychologically complex character developments in contemporary animation, demonstrating how repeated exposure to cosmic horror and interdimensional trauma can either destroy a developing mind or forge it into something capable of maintaining moral clarity and emotional authenticity despite circumstances that would corrupt most adults who lack his fundamental decency and innate resilience. His evolution throughout the series reveals hidden depths of courage, intelligence, and leadership potential that were initially overshadowed by his obvious social awkwardness and academic struggles, but which gradually emerged as he learned to navigate impossible situations that required not just survival instincts, but genuine wisdom about human nature and ethical decision-making under extreme pressure. Morty's role as Rick's adventure companion was originally defined not by any recognition of his individual worth or potential, but by his practical utility as biological camouflage that could mask Rick's distinctive brain wave patterns from interdimensional authorities and hostile forces who might otherwise be able to track Rick's movements across the multiverse. The scientific principle underlying this arrangement suggested that Morty's neural activity somehow complemented Rick's mental processes in ways that created interference patterns capable of defeating sophisticated detection systems, but the casual way Rick explained this function revealed his initial inability to value Morty as anything more than convenient equipment necessary for operational security during interdimensional travel. The psychological impact of learning that his primary value to his grandfather stemmed from neurological compatibility rather than personal affection or family bonds created deep insecurities about his worth and significance that Morty struggled to overcome throughout his development as Rick's partner in increasingly dangerous and morally complex adventures. His gradual realization that Rick's protective instincts and genuine care for his welfare extended far beyond purely practical considerations represented crucial emotional growth that enabled him to develop confidence in his own value as individual, rather than simply accepting his role as expendable sidekick whose safety mattered only insofar as it served Rick's operational requirements. Morty's moral compass proved remarkably resistant to corruption. Despite repeated exposure to situations where conventional ethical frameworks provided inadequate guidance for navigating complex choices between competing values and impossible trade-offs that offered no clearly right answers, his persistent concern for innocent bystanders and his resistance to casual violence served as necessary moral ballast during adventures that might otherwise have devolved into purely destructive chaos. As Rick's superior intelligence and technological capabilities created constant temptations to solve problems through force and manipulation, rather than seeking solutions that respected the autonomy and welfare of everyone affected by their actions. The development of Morty's confidence occurred gradually through accumulated experiences that demonstrated his ability to handle crisis situations with remarkable competence when necessity demanded that he step beyond his comfort zone and assume responsibility for outcomes that affected not just his own survival, but the welfare of family members and innocent strangers who depended on his ability to make sound decisions under pressure. His transition from someone who required constant protection and guidance to someone capable of independent action and leadership reflected both natural maturation and the extraordinary circumstances that forced him to develop capabilities most teenagers never have opportunities to discover or cultivate. Morty's relationship dynamics with each family member evolved in distinct ways that reflected both his growing maturity and his increasing understanding of how Rick's presence had affected the psychological development and emotional needs of everyone in the household, enabling him to serve as bridge between Rick's cosmic perspective and the more conventional concerns that motivated Beth, Jerry, and Summer in their daily lives. His ability to translate between these different worldviews became increasingly important as family adventures expanded to include more members who lacked his extensive experience with interdimensional travel and the psychological challenges that such experiences inevitably created. His romantic relationships demonstrated Morty's capacity for normal teenage emotions and genuine connection, despite the extraordinary circumstances that defined most of his existence and the psychological burdens he carried from repeated trauma that he could not discuss with peers who lacked any framework for understanding the nature of his experiences or the impact they had on his emotional development and social functioning. His relationship with Jessica and other romantic interests revealed his desire for ordinary human connections and his ability to maintain hope for conventional happiness, despite exposure to cosmic perspectives that might otherwise have rendered normal social interactions meaningless or impossibly trivial. The burden of keeping interdimensional secrets from friends, teachers, and other authority figures created ongoing psychological stress that Morty managed with remarkable resilience, as he learned to compartmentalize his extraordinary experiences while maintaining engagement with ordinary social institutions like school and peer relationships that provided necessary connection to normal human development processes. His academic performance suffered at times due to the disruptions and distractions caused by interdimensional adventures, but his fundamental intelligence remained evident in his ability to understand complex scientific concepts and adapt quickly to alien environments and unfamiliar social systems during travel to alternate realities. Morty's gradual recognition of his own potential and hidden capabilities represented perhaps the most significant aspect of his character development, as he discovered reserves of courage, intelligence, and leadership ability that had been dormant during his early years of social anxiety and academic struggles, but which emerged when circumstances demanded that he rise to meet extraordinary challenges. His success in various crisis situations demonstrated that his apparent limitations were often more about lack of opportunity and confidence, rather than genuine inability to handle complex problems and high-stakes decision-making. When properly motivated and supported, his relationship with alternate versions of himself provided disturbing insights into how different circumstances and choices could lead to dramatically different outcomes for people who shared the same basic personality traits and genetic inheritance, raising complex questions about identity, destiny, and the degree to which individual development was determined by inherent characteristics versus environmental influences and random circumstances. The encounter with evil Morty in particular forced him to confront the possibility that his own moral development was not inevitable, but represented active choices that could have led to completely different personality outcomes under different conditions. The psychological impact of repeated dimensional displacement and reality replacement created cumulative trauma that Morty processed with remarkable emotional intelligence, gradually developing coping mechanisms that enabled him to maintain psychological stability. Despite experiences that would completely overwhelm most adults who lacked his natural resilience and Rick's inadvertent training in crisis management, his ability to adapt to constantly changing circumstances while maintaining core personality traits and values demonstrated exceptional mental flexibility combined with strong moral foundations that provided stability during periods of extreme uncertainty and danger. Morty's emergence as genuine partner, rather than simple sidekick, created new tensions in his relationship with Rick, as he became less willing to accept Rick's decisions without question and more inclined to propose alternative approaches to complex problems based on his growing understanding of human psychology and social dynamics that Rick's cosmic perspective sometimes prevented him from appreciating fully. This evolution from passive follower to active collaborator represented healthy psychological development that Rick both encouraged and found frustrating when Morty's insights conflicted with his preferred methods for handling difficult situations. The leadership qualities that Morty displayed during various crisis situations revealed natural abilities that had been suppressed by his social anxiety and low self-esteem, but which emerged when he was placed in positions where others depended on his ability to make sound decisions and provide clear direction during emergency situation. His success in organizing resistance efforts and coordinating group responses to threats demonstrated tactical thinking and interpersonal skills that exceeded what anyone, including Rick, had expected from someone who appeared so uncertain and anxious in ordinary social situations. Morty's capacity for growth and learning exceeded normal parameters for adolescent development due to the extraordinary nature of his experiences and the constant necessity of adapting to new environments, alien cultures, and impossible situations that required him to expand his understanding of reality and possibility on a regular basis. His intellectual development accelerated through exposure to advanced scientific concepts and interdimensional phenomena that most humans never encounter, but his emotional and moral development remained grounded in fundamental human values that provided necessary stability and authenticity despite the cosmic scope of his adventures. The relationship between Morty's growing capabilities and his persistent vulnerability created ongoing dramatic tension throughout the series, as his increased confidence and competence never eliminated the genuine dangers that resulted from association with Rick and participation in adventures that regularly threatened not just physical safety, but psychological stability and moral integrity. His ability to maintain hope and emotional connection despite repeated trauma demonstrated exceptional resilience that enabled him to serve as emotional anchor for family members who might otherwise have been completely overwhelmed by the implications of interdimensional existence and cosmic awareness. Morty's ultimate significance in Rick's life transcended his practical utility as brainwave camouflage or adventure companion to encompass his role as moral conscience and emotional connection that prevented Rick from completely losing touch with human values and the capacity for genuine care about individual welfare rather than abstract principles or personal objectives. The genuine affection and respect that developed between them represented Rick's most successful attempt at maintaining meaningful relationship despite his cosmic perspective and nihilistic worldview, while Morty's ability to love and trust Rick, despite full knowledge of his moral compromises and destructive capabilities, demonstrated the kind of unconditional acceptance that Rick had not experienced since the death of his original family decades earlier. The hero's journey that Morty completed over the course of the series involved not just external adventures and physical challenges, but internal growth that enabled him to maintain his essential humanity and moral clarity while developing the strength and wisdom necessary to survive in a universe that operated according to principles completely divorced from human needs or values, creating a character whose heroism lay not in extraordinary abilities or cosmic power, but in his determination to remain decent and caring, despite exposure to experiences that had corrupted or destroyed countless other beings who lacked his fundamental resilience and ethical foundation. The episodes that have achieved iconic status within Rick and Morty's extensive catalogue represent far more than simple entertainment or clever science fiction concepts, serving instead as profound explorations of philosophical questions about identity, meaning, relationship, and moral responsibility that use interdimensional adventure as framework for examining fundamental aspects of human existence that most people never have occasion to consider directly or honestly throughout their entire lives. These landmark episodes demonstrate how animated television can address complex psychological and ethical issues with sophistication that rivals the most serious dramatic works, while maintaining accessibility and emotional engagement that makes abstract concepts personally relevant and emotionally compelling for audiences who might otherwise dismiss such questions as purely academic or theoretical concerns. Rick Potion number 9 established the template for Rick and Morty's approach to consequence and responsibility by demonstrating how Rick's casual attitude toward experimentation and problem-solving could create catastrophic results that affected entire populations, while also introducing the concept of dimensional replacement as both practical solution and moral horror that would define much of the series' philosophical framework throughout subsequent seasons. The love potion that Rick created for Morty's romantic difficulties was intended as simple chemical manipulation to boost confidence and social success, but its rapid mutation into global pandemic revealed how even well-intentioned scientific intervention could spiral beyond control when implemented without adequate safety protocols or consideration for unintended consequences that might affect innocent populations. The transformation of Earth's entire human population into grotesque genetic mutations represented Rick's first major failure in his role as Morty's protector and mentor, demonstrating that even his extraordinary scientific capabilities could not always reverse the damage caused by his own reckless experimentation and casual disregard for potential consequences that extended beyond his immediate Objectives: the decision to abandon their ruined reality in favor of a dimension where their alternate selves had died in unrelated accidents provided practical solution to their survival needs while creating profound psychological trauma for Morty, who was forced to bury his own corpse and assume the identity of his deceased alternate self. The final scene of Rick Potion number 9, accompanied by Mazzy Star's haunting look on down from the bridge, established the emotional template for the series' most significant moments by demonstrating how cosmic horror and existential crisis could be grounded in genuine human emotion and relatable psychological responses to impossible situations. Morty's traumatic realization that his original family was dead and that he was living among replacement relatives who had no knowledge of his true origins created lasting psychological damage that informed his character development throughout subsequent seasons, while Rick's casual dismissal of these concerns revealed the emotional detachment that enabled him to function despite constant exposure to evidence of his own moral failures. Total Recall expanded the series' exploration of memory and identity by introducing parasites that could implant false memories of relationships and experiences so convincing that they became indistinguishable from authentic recollections, raising fundamental questions about the nature of personal history and the degree to which identity depends on accurate memory versus consistent narrative construction that provides meaning and continuity regardless of its objective truth or fictional nature. The concept that beloved family memories could be artificially generated by hostile entities forced viewers to confront uncomfortable possibilities about their own relationships and experiences, questioning whether the emotional significance of particular memories depended on their authenticity or their psychological impact on identity formation and relationship development. The Smith family's struggle to identify genuine family members among the memory parasites demonstrated how even intimate knowledge of loved ones could be undermined by sophisticated psychological manipulation that exploited natural tendencies toward idealization and selective memory, construction that characterizes most long-term relationships. The revelation that certain family members might themselves be parasites created paranoia and mistrust that threatened to destroy the emotional bonds that provided foundation for healthy family functioning. While the ultimate solution required family members to focus on negative memories and painful experiences that they normally preferred to minimize or forget entirely, the philosophical implications of total recall extended beyond simple questions about memory accuracy to encompass broader issues about the construction of identity through narrative and the degree to which personality and relationships depend on particular historical experiences versus ongoing patterns of interaction and emotional connection that might transcend specific factual details about past events. The episode suggested that while authentic memory might be psychologically important, the emotional bonds between family members could survive revelation that some cherished experiences had been artificially implanted, provided that underlying care and commitment remained genuine, regardless of the specific incidents that had originally fostered those feelings. The Ricklantis mix-up functioned as sophisticated social commentary disguised as interdimensional adventure, using the Citadel of Ricks as microcosm for exploring issues of class inequality, political corruption, systemic oppression, and revolutionary violence that reflected real-world social problems while maintaining enough fantastical elements to avoid becoming heavy-handed political propaganda or losing entertainment value through excessive didacticism. The anthology structure allowed the episode to examine multiple perspectives on social organization and individual agency within systems designed to maintain existing power structures regardless of their impact on the welfare of less privileged populations. The various storylines within the Citadel revealed how even societies composed entirely of versions of the same individual could reproduce many of the same problems that plagued ordinary civilizations, including economic inequality, workplace exploitation, educational tracking that reinforced class distinctions, and political systems that served elite interests rather than promoting genuine collective welfare or individual opportunity for advancement based on merit rather than circumstantial advantages. The episode demonstrated that social problems stemmed not from differences between groups, but from structural arrangements that concentrated power and resources among limited populations while excluding others from meaningful participation in decision-making processes that affected their lives and opportunities. Evil Morty's political rise within the Citadel represented both legitimate response to systemic oppression and demonstration of how revolutionary movements could be corrupted by leaders who sought power for personal rather than collective benefit, using popular grievances as vehicles for achieving individual objectives that might prove as destructive as the systems they claim to oppose. His campaign promises of reform and equality masked agenda focused on personal escape from Rick-dominated reality rather than genuine commitment to improving conditions for other Mortys who would remain trapped within existing power structures after his departure. Pickle Rick became perhaps the most culturally significant episode despite or because of its seemingly ridiculous central premise, using Rick's transformation into vegetable form as elaborate metaphor for avoidance of emotional responsibility and therapeutic engagement, while demonstrating his ability to create impressive technological solutions to physical challenges while remaining completely unable to address the psychological and relationship problems that required vulnerability and honest self-examination rather than scientific innovation or superior intelligence. The contrast between Rick's resourcefulness in survival situations and his helplessness when confronted with family therapy sessions revealed fundamental limitations in his approach to problem solving that extended far beyond technical challenges to encompass the interpersonal skills and emotional intelligence necessary for maintaining healthy relationships. Dr. Wong's therapeutic interventions throughout the episode provided rare example of external authority figure who could not be intimidated or manipulated by Rick's superior intelligence and technological capabilities, forcing him to confront psychological insights and behavioral patterns that he preferred to avoid through constant activity and intellectual superiority, rather than honest reflection on his motivations and their impact on family members, who depended on him for emotional stability and guidance. Her observations about Rick's tendency to use intelligence as weapon against emotional vulnerability resonated with audiences because they identified similar patterns in their own lives and relationships where intellectual superiority became defensive mechanism against genuine intimacy and mutual dependence. The family therapy scenes demonstrated how Rick's presence affected every aspect of family dynamics through his inability to participate in emotional processes that required reciprocal vulnerability and acknowledgement of interdependence, rather than the constant assertion of superiority and control that characterized his approach to all relationships. His dismissal of therapeutic concepts and resistance to psychological insight revealed deep insecurities about his own emotional needs and fear that honest examination of his behavior might require him to change in ways that would threaten his sense of identity and autonomy. The Vat of Acid episode represented Rick and Morty's most direct exploration of power dynamics and moral responsibility within their relationship, using Rick's fake vat of acid and Morty's save point device as framework for examining how unlimited capability to reverse consequences might affect individual development, and ethical reasoning when actions no longer carried permanent weight or required careful consideration before implementation. Morty's temporary access to consequence-free existence revealed both the appeal and the ultimate emptiness of power without responsibility, as he initially used his abilities for personal gratification and convenience before discovering that meaningful experience required genuine risk and permanent commitment. The relationship between power and moral development became central theme as Morty's save point adventures gradually escalated from minor conveniences to increasingly selfish and destructive behavior that affected innocent people who lacked access to the same consequence reversal. Technology that enabled him to treat their welfare as expendable elements in his personal experimentation, with different approaches to social interaction and romantic pursuit. His growing callousness toward Jerry and other family members demonstrated how even temporary immunity from consequences could corrupt moral reasoning and emotional connection, transforming someone with naturally compassionate instincts into someone capable of casual cruelty justified through technological superiority. Rick's motivations for creating the save point scenario remained ambiguous throughout the episode, suggesting either genuine desire to teach Morty important lessons about responsibility and consequence, or more manipulative objectives related to maintaining psychological control over his grandson through demonstration of how power, without wisdom, inevitably led to isolation and moral corruption. The revelation that Rick had orchestrated the entire experience to prove specific points about the relationship between consequence and meaning raised questions about the ethics of psychological manipulation, even when conducted for supposedly educational purposes. A Rick Convenient Mort stood out as rare example of Rick and Morty episode that focused primarily on emotional authenticity and genuine character development, rather than science fiction concepts or philosophical abstraction, using Morty's romantic relationship with Planetina to explore themes of passionate love, ideological compatibility, moral compromise, and the painful necessity of choosing personal growth over immediate gratification when relationships become psychologically or ethically unsustainable. Despite continued emotional investment from both parties involved in the romantic connection, the portrayal of Morty and Planetina's relationship captured the intensity and authenticity of adolescent romance, while also examining how genuine emotional connection could coexist with fundamental incompatibilities that made long-term relationship impossible, regardless of the strength of mutual attraction and affection between partners who shared similar values and interests, but approached moral questions from irreconcilably different perspectives. Their breakup represented mature recognition that love alone was insufficient foundation for sustainable relationship, when basic approaches to ethics and responsibility created conflicts that could not be resolved through compromise or mutual accommodation. Beth's protective instincts and reservations about Morty's relationship demonstrated parental wisdom that transcended her usual dysfunction and emotional unavailability, as she recognized potential problems with the romantic intensity that Morty experienced as validation and connection, but which she understood from adult perspective might prevent him from developing healthy relationship patterns based on gradual trust building and compatibility assessment, rather than immediate passion and idealization. Her interventions reflected genuine maternal concern rather than jealousy or control, showing character growth that enabled her to prioritize Morty's long-term well-being over his immediate happiness, or her own comfort with family dynamics. Meta-episodes throughout the series demonstrated Rick and Morty's sophisticated relationship with its own narrative structure and audience expectations, using self-referential humor and direct commentary on storytelling conventions to explore questions about the nature of entertainment, audience engagement, creative responsibility, and the relationship between fictional narratives and real-world meaning-making processes that individuals use to construct identity and purpose within their own lives. These episodes revealed the creators' awareness of their show's cultural impact, while also examining the limitations and potential problems inherent in meta-textual approaches to comedy and drama that prioritized cleverness over emotional authenticity. The Story Train episode in particular used literally infinite recursive storytelling to demonstrate both the creative possibilities and ultimate emptiness of purely self-referential narrative that became disconnected from genuine human experience and emotional stakes that could engage audiences in meaningful ways rather than simply demonstrating intellectual sophistication or creative technical ability. The episode suggested that while meta-commentary could be entertaining and intellectually stimulating, it could not substitute for authentic character development and emotional investment that provided foundation for lasting cultural significance and personal resonance with audience members seeking connection and meaning rather than abstract intellectual exercise. Character development milestones embedded within key episodes demonstrated how individual growth occurred through accumulated experience and gradual psychological maturation, rather than sudden revelation or dramatic transformation, creating realistic portraits of human development that acknowledged the slow and often contradictory nature of personality change, while also showing how extraordinary circumstances could accelerate certain aspects of growth and self-discovery. The integration of character development with plot advancement created narrative sophistication that rewarded long-term viewing and emotional investment, while also providing immediate entertainment value for casual viewers who might not track subtle psychological evolution across multiple seasons. Hidden details and Easter eggs throughout iconic episodes revealed the creator's attention to continuity and world building that extended far beyond immediate narrative requirements to encompass ongoing mythology development and thematic reinforcement that added layers of meaning for dedicated viewers while never becoming essential for basic comprehension or enjoyment of individual episodes. These background elements demonstrated respect for audience, intelligence, and engagement, while also providing foundation for fan community discussions and interpretive analysis that extended the cultural life of episodes beyond their initial broadcast and immediate entertainment value. The rogues gallery that populates Rick and Morty's universe represents far more than simple antagonistic forces designed to create conflict and drive plot development, serving instead as psychological mirrors that reflect different aspects of Rick's damaged psyche, while also demonstrating how power, intelligence, and cosmic awareness can corrupt even well-intentioned beings when divorced from genuine human connection and ethical consideration for the welfare of others. These villains and threats operate across a spectrum from personal enemies who represent Rick's past failures and moral compromises to cosmic horrors that embody existential challenges to the very foundations of meaning and identity that conscious beings require to maintain psychological stability in an apparently indifferent universe that operates according to principles completely divorced from individual needs or values. Evil Morty's origin story reveals the most disturbing implications of Rick's approach to mentorship and family relationships, demonstrating how prolonged exposure to Rick's nihilistic worldview and casual disregard for conventional morality could transform even the most innocent and well-intentioned young person into something approaching cosmic threat. capable of systematic violence and manipulation that exceeded Rick's own capacity for destruction and control. The psychological transformation that created evil Morty from presumably ordinary grandson represents Rick's greatest failure as protector and guide, showing how his inability to provide genuine emotional support and ethical guidance could corrupt the very people he claimed to care about most deeply. The systematic nature of evil Morty's campaign against Rick's civilization demonstrated strategic thinking and long-term planning that surpassed anything Rick had achieved during his own years of multiversal violence, suggesting that the corruption process had not simply created another version of Rick's destructive tendencies, but had generated something qualitatively different and potentially more dangerous than Rick's reactive patterns of revenge and self-medication through scientific achievement and interdimensional travel. Evil Morty's ability to manipulate other Ricks through their own psychological vulnerabilities and predictable behavior patterns revealed intimate understanding of Rick's psychology that could only have been acquired through prolonged exposure to Rick's methods and motivations. The torture chamber filled with suffering Mortys represented both evidence of evil Morty's capacity for systematic cruelty and deliberate recreation of the psychological torture that Rick's influence inflicted on vulnerable young people who lacked the emotional resources or life experience necessary to process cosmic awareness and moral ambiguity without losing their essential humanity and capacity for ethical reasoning. The industrial scale of the operation suggested that evil Morty's activities extended far beyond personal revenge to encompass broader philosophical rejection of the entire structure of Rick-dominated reality that treated Mortys as expendable resources rather than autonomous individuals, deserving of protection and guidance. Evil Morty's ultimate escape beyond the central finite curve represented not just tactical victory over Rick, but existential rejection of the entire framework of reality that Rick had constructed to protect his own psychological vulnerabilities while systematically oppressing infinite populations who had never threatened him or interfered with his personal objectives. The destruction of the Citadel and the breach in dimensional barriers that had contained Rick's influence demonstrated capabilities that exceeded Rick's own technological achievements, while also revealing motivations that transcended simple revenge to encompass genuine desire for freedom, from systems of oppression that reduced conscious beings to functions within structures designed to serve Rick's emotional needs. The philosophical sophistication of evil Morty's analysis of Rick's psychology and multiversal politics revealed intellectual development that combined Rick-level strategic thinking with genuine insight into the psychological costs of power and the corrupting influence of cosmic perspective on individual moral reasoning and emotional authenticity. His observation that everyone eventually becomes evil from Rick's perspective represented not just commentary on Rick's worldview, but accurate analysis of how prolonged exposure to Rick's influence gradually eroded the capacity for normal human moral responses and emotional connection to specific individuals and particular versions of reality. Rick Prime's role as architect of Rick's trauma extended far beyond simple murder of Diane and Beth to encompass systematic destruction of the psychological foundations that had enabled Rick to function as loving family member and ethical scientist before his transformation into interdimensional force of destruction and manipulation. Rick Prime's casual attitude toward violence and his apparent indifference to the consequences of his actions for innocent populations represented everything that Rick might have become if he had accepted the original offer of Portal technology without maintaining connection to human values and emotional relationships. The systematic elimination of Diane across infinite realities demonstrated Rick Prime's understanding of psychological warfare and his recognition that destroying hope and possibility for meaningful connection was more devastating than simple physical violence or material destruction. The Omega device that enabled such comprehensive erasure of individual existence represented technological achievement that transcended normal scientific capability to encompass something approaching cosmic horror, as it eliminated not just particular people, but entire categories of possibility and relationship across infinite dimensions. Rick Prime's abandonment of his original family revealed the ultimate consequences of choosing power over connection, demonstrating how cosmic capabilities could enable beings to transcend normal human limitations, while also destroying their capacity for the kind of meaningful relationships that provided purpose and emotional stability to conscious existence. His transformation into purely selfish force of destruction represented cautionary example of what Rick might have become if he had not maintained some connection to human values through his replacement family relationships, despite their foundation in deception and manipulation. The psychological parallel between Rick Prime and Rick C-137 extended beyond their shared scientific capabilities to encompass fundamental similarities in their approach to problem solving and their tendency to treat other conscious beings as resources to be manipulated rather than individuals deserving of respect and autonomy. The main difference between them lay not in their essential characteristics, but in the choices they made about how to respond to trauma and power, with Rick Prime choosing complete detachment, while Rick C-137 maintained enough human connection to prevent total moral collapse. Mr. Nimbus and the complexity of Rick's past relationships revealed how Rick's current isolation and emotional detachment were not simply results of cosmic awareness and superior intelligence, but represented defensive responses to previous relationship failures that had caused genuine pain and disappointment when Rick's expectations for friendship and partnership were not met by beings who lacked his capabilities or commitment to particular shared objectives. The antagonistic nature of Rick's relationship with Mr. Nimbus suggested that even his friendships were characterized by competition and conflict rather than genuine mutual support and emotional intimacy. The Ocean Master's political authority and his ability to challenge Rick's dominance in specific contexts demonstrated that Rick's superiority was not absolute, and that other beings possessed forms of power and influence that could effectively counter his technological advantages when applied within appropriate environmental and social contexts. Mr. Nimbus's casual dismissal of Rick's scientific achievements and his insistence on diplomatic protocols revealed Rick's vulnerability to beings who refused to be impressed by his capabilities or intimidated by his reputation for violence and manipulation. The personal history between Rick and Mr. Nimbus included sexual and romantic complications that Rick preferred not to discuss or acknowledge, suggesting that his current inability to maintain healthy relationships was partly a result of previous experiences that had ended badly due to his own psychological limitations and inability to compromise or accommodate the needs and perspectives of partners who required emotional reciprocity rather than simply intellectual stimulation or technological advancement for their personal benefit. The Galactic Federation represented systematic oppression and bureaucratic control that threatened Rick's autonomy while also providing him with external enemies that justified his antisocial behavior and resistance to legitimate authority structures that might have improved collective welfare. If Rick had been willing to participate constructively, rather than viewing all governmental systems as threats to his personal freedom and superiority, the Federation's sophisticated technology and organizational capabilities demonstrated that Rick's individual achievements, however impressive, could not compete effectively against coordinated collective action by beings who shared resources and knowledge, rather than hoarding their capabilities for personal advantage. The economic warfare that Rick conducted against the Federation through currency manipulation revealed both his understanding of systemic vulnerabilities and his willingness to inflict suffering on innocent populations in pursuit of personal objectives that had nothing to do with their welfare or the justice of their governmental systems. The cascading collapse of interstellar commerce and the destruction of social services that depended on economic stability caused suffering for billions of beings who had never threatened Rick or interfered with his activities, demonstrating his casual indifference to collateral damage when it served his strategic purposes. Phoenix Person and the cost of Rick's friendships demonstrated how Rick's inability to process loss and emotional trauma led him to make technological solutions to relationship problems that required psychological healing and honest communication about needs, expectations, and mutual responsibilities within friendship structures that demanded reciprocal care and support, rather than simply shared adventures and intellectual stimulation. The cybernetic resurrection of Bird Person created an artificial version of friendship that served Rick's emotional needs while ignoring the autonomy and genuine welfare of the friend he claimed to care about protecting and preserving. The brainwashing and personality modification that created Phoenix Person represented Rick's ultimate expression of controlling behavior in relationships, as he literally rewrote his friend's consciousness to eliminate inconvenient memories and personality traits that might interfere with Rick's preferred version of their relationship dynamics. The violation of Bird Person's mental autonomy and individual identity demonstrated how Rick's love was always conditional on other people conforming to his expectations and requirements, rather than accepting them as independent beings with their own perspectives and needs. Tammy and the betrayal that shattered Rick's trust revealed his vulnerability to beings who could effectively disguise their true motivations and allegiances while infiltrating his social circles and gathering intelligence about his activities and relationships. The wedding massacre and Bird Person's apparent death represented Rick's worst fears about the consequences of emotional investment and trust, confirming his belief that caring about others inevitably led to pain and loss that could only be avoided through complete emotional detachment and strategic paranoia about everyone's ultimate motivations and loyalties. The Galactic Federation agent's successful infiltration of Rick's inner circle demonstrated sophisticated understanding of his psychological vulnerabilities and his desperate need for connection, despite his defensive isolation and antisocial behavior patterns. Tammy's ability to maintain her cover while gathering crucial intelligence about Rick's capabilities and plans revealed that his reputation for superior intelligence did not protect him from beings who combine strategic thinking with genuine understanding of human psychology and émotionnelle manipulation technique. The various alien civilizations and their conflicts with Rick represented different approaches to social organization, technological development, and moral reasoning that challenged Rick's assumptions about the inevitability of his own worldview and the superiority of his individual approach to existence over collective solutions to common problems. Many of these civilizations had achieved remarkable advances in particular areas while maintaining social cohesion and ethical frameworks that Rick dismissed as weaknesses, but which actually enabled them to accomplish things that his individual capabilities could not achieve through pure technological superiority. The recurring pattern of Rick creating enemies through his casual disregard for diplomatic protocols and cultural sensitivities revealed how his intellectual arrogance and emotional isolation prevented him from recognizing legitimate perspectives and valuable knowledge that other beings had. developed through different approaches to understanding reality and organizing social relationships. His tendency to assume that technological superiority justified cultural imperialism and moral flexibility created conflicts that could have been avoided through simple respect for autonomy and genuine curiosity about alternative solutions to common problems. The difference between cosmic threats and personal enemies in Rick's experience often reflected more about his own psychological state than about the actual level of danger that various antagonists posed to his welfare or that of his Pronzes, family members. Personal enemies like Jerry or school administrators who challenged his authority over family decision-making processes often provoked more intense emotional responses than genuine cosmic horrors that threatened the stability of reality itself, revealing how his defensive mechanisms were calibrated to protect his ego and control, rather than to assess actual threats to meaningful values or important relationships. The way that villains served to highlight the hero's development throughout the series demonstrated how external challenges could reveal hidden strengths and capabilities, while also exposing psychological vulnerabilities and moral blind spots that required growth and change to overcome successfully. The most effective antagonists forced Rick and his family members to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves, while also providing opportunities to demonstrate courage, loyalty, and ethical reasoning that proved their capacity for genuine heroism. Despite their obvious flaws and moral failures in less critical situations, the intricate tapestry of background details and hidden lore that permeates every frame of Rick and Morty reveals a level of creative attention and world-building sophistication that extends far beyond immediate narrative requirements, creating layers of meaning and continuity that reward dedicated viewers while never becoming essential for basic comprehension or enjoyment of individual episodes. These carefully embedded elements demonstrate the creator's respect for audience intelligence and their commitment to constructing a coherent fictional universe that maintains internal consistency across multiple seasons and storylines, even when dealing with concepts as potentially chaotic as infinite realities and interdimensional travel that could easily justify complete abandonment of logical continuity or meaningful consequence. Background visual gags and recurring elements throughout the series operate on multiple levels simultaneously, providing immediate comedic value for attentive viewers, while also contributing to ongoing world-building efforts that establish the distinctive aesthetic and cultural characteristics of various alien civilizations, alternate realities, and interdimensional locations that Rick and his family encounter during their adventures. The consistency of these visual details across episodes, separated by years of real-world production time, demonstrates remarkable attention to continuity that extends beyond simple callback references to encompass genuine commitment to maintaining the internal logic and aesthetic coherence of the show's fictional universe. The alien advertisements and background signage that appear in interdimensional locations reveal sophisticated linguistic construction and cultural world-building that suggests entire civilizations with their own economic systems, social structures, and commercial relationships that exist independently of Rick's adventures, but provide authentic environmental context for his interactions with various alien species and interdimensional communities. These details create a sense of lived-in universe, where Rick's activities represent small disruptions within much larger ongoing social and economic processes, rather than adventures occurring within settings created solely to serve immediate plot requirements. The The significance of green portals versus other colors represents one of the most consistent and meaningful visual distinctions in the series, with Rick's characteristic green swirls indicating his specific portal technology, while other colors suggest different dimensional mechanics, technological origins, or interdimensional authorities operating according to alternative scientific principles and mathematical frameworks. The rare appearances of yellow portals, blue portals, and other variations provide subtle indicators of major plot developments and thematic shifts that careful viewers can recognize as signals of important changes in the show's cosmic framework and Rick's relationship to broader, multiversal politics. Evil Morty's yellow portals during his escape beyond the central finite curve represented not just technological achievement, but symbolic rejection of Rick's entire approach to interdimensional travel, suggesting that his portal technology operated according to fundamentally different principles that enabled access to realities beyond Rick's carefully curated selection of dimensions, where Rick intelligence remained dominant. The color change indicated liberation from Rick's conceptual limitations, while also foreshadowing potential threats and opportunities that existed beyond the boundaries of Rick's understanding and control. The blue portals associated with the citadel of Rick's suggested bureaucratic standardization and collective technological development that differed from Rick's individual approach to portal creation, indicating how organized Rick's society had developed alternative methods and protocols that prioritized stability and administrative control over the individual innovation and risk-taking that characterized Rick's C-137's approach to interdimensional travel and scientific development. Alien languages and their translation throughout the series demonstrate consistent linguistic construction that suggests genuine attention to creating believable communication systems rather than simply generating random sounds or symbols. For comedic effect, with recurring alien words and phrases, maintaining consistent meanings across episodes and contexts, while also evolving to include new vocabulary and grammatical structures as the show's alien civilizations develop greater complexity and cultural depth. The Galactic Federation's language systems reveal sophisticated governmental and administrative terminology that reflects bureaucratic complexity and legal frameworks designed to manage interdimensional commerce, criminal justice, and diplomatic relationships between various species and civilizations that participate in their political and economic systems. The consistency of Federation terminology across episodes suggests genuine effort to create believable governmental structures with their own internal logic and procedural requirements, rather than simply generating authoritarian imagery for immediate plot purposes. Squanch language represents one of the most developed alien communication systems in the series, with consistent grammatical rules that enable translation between Squanch concepts and human language, while also suggesting cultural and philosophical frameworks that differ significantly from human approaches to meaning and communication. The ability of family members to learn and use Squanch effectively demonstrates both the linguistic sophistication of the alien system and the adaptability of human consciousness when exposed to alternative approaches to expressing ideas and emotions. Continuity details that connect episodes across seasons reveal long-term planning and thematic consistency that extends far beyond immediate plot requirements to encompass ongoing character development, relationship evolution, and gradual revelation of backstory elements that provide deeper understanding of character motivations and psychological development throughout the series. These connections demonstrate respect for audience attention and memory, while also creating narrative rewards for dedicated viewing that extend beyond simple entertainment value to encompass genuine emotional investment in character growth and relationship development. The Jerry daycare ticket that established Jerry B theory represents one of the most subtle and complex continuity elements in the series, suggesting that seemingly minor details about family identity and dimensional origin might have significant implications for understanding character, relationships, and the authentic nature of family bonds that viewers assume to be straightforward, but which actually involve complex questions about identity, authenticity, and the significance of particular versions of familiar people versus the underlying emotional connections that transcend specific dimensional boundaries. Rick's portal fluid supplies and their gradual depletion throughout various episodes create ongoing practical constraints that affect adventure possibilities, while also serving as reminder that even Rick's seemingly unlimited capabilities operate within resource limitations that require planning and conservation rather than infinite abundance. The scarcity of portal fluid creates dramatic tension and forces Rick to make strategic decisions about when and how to use his interdimensional capabilities, adding practical stakes to adventures that might otherwise seem consequence-free due to Rick's apparent ability to solve any problem through superior technology. Character appearances in background scenes throughout the series reveal ongoing lives and relationships that exist independently of main plot developments, suggesting that alien species, interdimensional beings, and alternate versions of familiar characters continue their own development and pursue their own objectives, regardless of whether Rick and his family interact with them directly. These background appearances create sense of continuity and ongoing consequence that prevents the show's universe from seeming like a collection of isolated adventure settings, created solely to serve immediate entertainment purposes. The recurring appearance of Bird Person in background scenes before his formal introduction suggested long-term planning for his eventual significance in Rick's backstory, while also demonstrating how even casual background elements might eventually become important plot and character development components. The subtle foreshadowing created through background appearances rewards careful attention while also suggesting that seemingly minor details might have greater significance than initially apparent, encouraging active viewing and speculation about future developments. Squanch family members appearing in various contexts across multiple episodes suggest ongoing community relationships and social networks that extend beyond Rick's immediate adventure requirements, indicating that his friendships and alliances exist within broader social contexts that include extended family relationships, community obligations, and cultural traditions that affect how his alien friends approach their relationships with Rick and their participation in his various schemes and adventures. The show's internal mythology and world-building consistency maintain logical relationships between various alien species, interdimensional organizations, governmental systems, and technological capabilities that create believable framework for understanding how Rick's individual capabilities relate to broader cosmic power structures and social hierarchies that exist throughout the multiverse. This consistency enables viewers to develop genuine understanding of the show's fictional universe, while also creating foundation for meaningful consequences and ongoing relationship development that extends beyond immediate episode boundaries. The Galactic Federation's consistent technological capabilities and organizational structure across episodes create believable governmental system with its own internal logic, resource limitations, and strategic objectives that explain their interactions with Rick, while also suggesting broader political and economic relationships that affect multiple species and civilizations throughout their sphere of influence. The Federation's consistent portrayal prevents them from becoming simple plot device, while also creating ongoing source of external pressure and conflict that affects Rick's decision-making and family relationships in meaningful ways. The Citadel's economic and social systems maintain internal consistency that reflects genuine consideration of how Rick-dominated society might organize itself to address practical needs, while also managing the psychological and social challenges that arise when dealing with multiple versions of the same individual with competing interests and conflicting approaches to similar problems and objectives. References to other Adult Swim shows and pop culture elements throughout Rick and Morty create meta-textual connections that acknowledge the show's place within broader entertainment contexts while also demonstrating the creators' awareness of their influences and their relationship to other creative works that have shaped contemporary animated television and science fiction storytelling. These references serve multiple functions simultaneously, providing immediate recognition, humor for knowledgeable viewers, while also suggesting thematic connections and stylistic influences that inform the show's approach to comedy, drama, and philosophical exploration. The Harvey Birdman references and other Adult Swim callback elements create sense of shared fictional universe, or at least mutual awareness between different animated properties, suggesting that Rick and Morty exists within broader creative ecosystem rather than complete isolation from other contemporary animated works. These connections acknowledge the collaborative nature of creative development, while also paying tribute to shows and creators that helped establish the audience and network support necessary for Rick and Morty's own success and creative freedom. Foreshadowing and setup that paid off seasons later demonstrate remarkable long-term planning and attention to narrative development that extends far beyond typical animated series requirements, suggesting genuine commitment to creating satisfying story arcs that reward sustained attention, while also building toward meaningful character development and relationship resolution, rather than simply maintaining status quo for indefinite period without growth or change. The payoffs for patient viewing create emotional satisfaction that extends beyond immediate entertainment value to encompass genuine investment in character welfare and relationship development. Evil Morty's eye patch and its eventual revelation as technological device rather than injury indicator represents sophisticated approach to character design that embedded crucial plot information within seemingly cosmetic details, rewarding attentive viewers who noticed inconsistencies or unusual elements, while also creating satisfying explanation for distinctive visual characteristics that initially appeared to be simple aesthetic choices designed to make the character more memorable and visually distinctive. Rick's various injuries and their healing patterns across episodes suggest either advanced medical technology or enhanced physical resilience that enables him to survive experiences that would kill normal humans. But the consistency of these recovery processes indicates attention to maintaining believable limitations on his capabilities, rather than treating him as completely invulnerable to physical harm or consequence. Fan theories that were confirmed or debunked throughout the series reveal the creators' awareness of audience speculation and their willingness to engage with viewer interpretation, while also maintaining creative independence and bland narrative surprise that prevents the show from becoming predictable or completely controlled by audience expectations, rather than creative vision and thematic development. The relationship between fan speculation and creative development creates collaborative dynamic that acknowledges audience intelligence while also preserving creative autonomy and artistic integrity. The attention to detail in animation and design extends beyond immediate visual requirements to encompass consistent character proportions, distinctive alien anatomy, believable technology design, and environmental consistency that creates immersive viewing experience, while also supporting the show's thematic concerns about identity, authenticity, and the relationship between appearance and underlying reality across multiple dimensions and species. The visual consistency enables viewers to develop genuine familiarity with the show's fictional universe, while also creating foundation for meaningful visual storytelling that communicates character information and thematic content. Through design choices rather than relying exclusively on dialogue and explicit exposition to convey important information about personality, relationships, and cultural context. The philosophical frameworks that emerge from Rick and Morty's exploration of infinite realities and cosmic consciousness represent some of the most sophisticated attempts in contemporary popular culture to grapple with fundamental questions about meaning, identity, moral responsibility, and the nature of human significance within apparently indifferent universal systems that operate according to principles completely divorced from individual needs, desires, or ethical considerations. The show's approach to these existential challenges avoids simple answers or comfortable reassurances, instead presenting complex philosophical positions that acknowledge the genuine difficulty of maintaining hope and ethical commitment in the face of overwhelming evidence that individual choices and relationships might be ultimately meaningless within cosmic frameworks that dwarf human understanding and reduce even extraordinary achievements to statistical insignificance across infinite possibilities. Nihilism versus existentialism in Rick's worldview represents the central philosophical tension that drives much of the series' exploration of meaning and purpose. As Rick's intellectual understanding of infinite realities and cosmic indifference leads him toward nihilistic conclusions about the ultimate meaninglessness of individual choice and relationship, while his continued emotional investment in specific people and particular outcomes reveals persistent existential commitments that contradict his explicit philosophical positions. His famous declaration that nothing matters serves as both defensive mechanism against emotional vulnerability and genuine expression of cosmic perspective that recognizes how infinite possibilities eliminate the significance of any particular configuration of events or relationships. The nihilistic implications of infinite realities suggest that every possible outcome exists somewhere across the multiverse, making individual choices essentially arbitrary, since all alternatives are equally real and equally valid within the broader cosmic framework that encompasses every conceivable variation of events and relationships. Rick's casual attitude toward dimensional replacement and his willingness to abandon entire realities when they become inconvenient reflects practical application of nihilistic philosophy that treats specific people and particular circumstances as interchangeable variables in equations, designed to optimize personal comfort rather than meaningful expressions of commitment or authentic emotional investment in unique individuals and irreplaceable experiences. But Rick's behavior consistently contradicts his nihilistic pronouncements, revealing existential commitments that persist despite his intellectual understanding of cosmic insignificance and his explicit rejection of conventional meaning-making frameworks that depend on assumptions about individual importance and moral significance. His desperate pursuit of revenge against Rick Prime, his protective instincts toward his family members, and his genuine grief over losses and betrayals demonstrate emotional investments that transcend rational calculation and suggest underlying existential beliefs about the significance of particular relationships and specific moral commitments that he cannot abandon despite their apparent logical inconsistency with his cosmic perspective. The existentialist elements in Rick's character emerge through his continued creation of meaning and purpose through action and relationship, even when his intellectual framework provides no justification for such commitments beyond arbitrary personal preference or psychological necessity. His scientific achievements, his family relationships, and his ongoing struggles with moral questions suggest existential engagement with the problem of creating authentic meaning within apparently meaningless cosmic systems, demonstrating how conscious beings might maintain ethical commitments and emotional investments despite recognition of their ultimate cosmic insignificance. The show's treatment of free will and determinism explores whether individual choices represent genuine agency and moral responsibility, or simply inevitable results of prior causes and cosmic forces that eliminate meaningful distinction between voluntary action and determined outcome within systems too complex for individual understanding or control. Rick's ability to predict and manipulate behavior suggests deterministic understanding of human psychology and social systems, but his own unpredictability and emotional responses indicate that even superior intelligence cannot completely eliminate the mystery of conscious choice and individual responsibility for ethical decisions. The portal gun's ability to access infinite realities raises questions about whether free will can exist within frameworks where every possible choice creates alternate realities containing versions of individuals who made different decisions, potentially eliminating moral responsibility by making all outcomes equally real and equally valid, regardless of the ethical considerations that motivated particular choices. If every possible version of every decision exists somewhere across infinite dimensions, then the significance of individual moral reasoning and ethical commitment becomes unclear, as no choice can prevent alternative outcomes from occurring in parallel realities. Rick's manipulation of probability and his ability to engineer desired outcomes through superior knowledge and technology suggests that apparent free will might be largely illusory for beings who lack cosmic perspective and advanced capabilities, but his own struggle with moral questions and his inability to completely control even his own emotional responses indicate that consciousness retains elements of genuine agency and authentic choice even within deterministic frameworks that limit available options and influence decision-making processes through environmental factors and psychological conditioning. Questions about the nature of identity across dimensions represent perhaps the most psychologically challenging aspect of the show's philosophical exploration, as repeated encounters with alternate versions of familiar characters force recognition that personality and individual significance might be far more arbitrary and replaceable than conventional assumptions about personal identity, relationship authenticity would suggest. The ease with which Rick abandons particular versions of his family members in favor of alternate replacements challenges fundamental assumptions about what makes individual relationships meaningful and whether emotional bonds depend on specific historical experiences or more general compatibility and affection patterns. The philosophical implications of interdimensional travel extend beyond practical questions about navigation and survival to encompass fundamental challenges to conventional concepts of personal continuity and relationship authenticity. When identical individuals exist across infinite realities with slightly different histories and personality variations, the question of whether Rick's love for his current family represents genuine emotional commitment to specific individuals or transferable affection that could be redirected toward alternate versions with equal validity creates uncertainty about the nature of authentic relationship and the significance of particular shared experiences versus general compatibility patterns. Evil Morty's analysis of Rick's psychology and his decision to escape beyond the central finite curve represent sophisticated philosophical response to the problems of identity and meaning within Rick-dominated reality systems that reduce individual agency and authentic choice to variables, within equations designed to maintain Rick's psychological stability rather than promoting genuine individual development and autonomous decision-making. His recognition that everyone eventually becomes evil from Rick's perspective suggests systematic analysis of how power, of relationships, corrupt moral reasoning, and eliminate possibilities for authentic ethical development within hierarchical systems that concentrate authority and decision-making power among individuals who lack emotional investment in collective welfare. The ethics of infinite possibilities and replaceable people challenge conventional moral frameworks that depend on assumptions about individual uniqueness and the irreplaceable value of specific relationships and particular life experiences within finite systems, where choices carry permanent consequences and individual welfare depends on ethical decision-making by community members who share responsibility for collective outcomes. Rick's casual treatment of dimension, abandonment, and family replacement suggests that infinite possibilities might eliminate moral significance by making every choice ultimately reversible and every relationship ultimately replaceable through access to alternative configurations that provide similar benefits without requiring commitment to particular individuals or specific ethical frameworks. The psychological cost of cosmic awareness becomes evident through Rick's alcoholism, emotional detachment, and inability to maintain stable relationships, despite his obvious need for connection and meaning that transcends his intellectual understanding of cosmic insignificance and individual arbitrariness. His self-destructive behaviors represent attempts to manage the cognitive dissonance between his existential needs for purpose and connection and his intellectual recognition of cosmic indifference that renders such needs psychologically necessary but logically unjustifiable, according to any objective framework for evaluating significance and meaning. The show's treatment of depression and mental health acknowledges how cosmic perspective and infinite awareness can create psychological burdens that exceed normal human capacity for emotional processing and meaning-making, leading to defensive mechanisms that protect consciousness from overwhelming recognition of insignificance, while also preventing genuine engagement with the relationships and activities that might provide psychological stability and authentic satisfaction despite their apparent cosmic meaninglessness. Rick's depression represents not just personal psychological dysfunction, but existential response to philosophical problems that have no satisfactory intellectual solutions, but which require practical, emotional approaches that prioritize psychological welfare over logical consistency. The balance between cosmic horror and family comedy throughout the series demonstrates how existential challenges and philosophical complexity can coexist with ordinary human concerns and emotional needs that provide foundation for psychological stability and authentic meaning despite their apparent insignificance within broader cosmic frameworks that dwarf individual experience and reduce personal relationships to statistical variables within infinite probability systems. The family's ability to maintain emotional connections and moral commitments, despite exposure to cosmic perspectives, suggests that meaning-making might depend more on psychological necessity and social relationship than on objective philosophical frameworks or cosmic significance. The philosophical implications of interdimensional travel encompass questions about moral responsibility and ethical commitment when actions in one reality might have no consequences for parallel versions of affected individuals, while simultaneously creating infinite variations where different choices lead to different outcomes for beings who share identity but not experience with individuals in the original reality. The problem of determining ethical obligations toward alternate versions of familiar people creates moral complexity that conventional ethical frameworks cannot adequately address without arbitrary assumptions about which relationships carry moral weight and which can be dismissed as irrelevant. Duplicates. The search for meaning in an apparently meaningless universe represents the central existential challenge that drives character development and relationship evolution throughout the series, as individual characters must find ways to maintain psychological stability and ethical commitment, despite exposure to evidence that their choices and relationships might be ultimately arbitrary and their individual existence might be cosmically insignificant. The various approaches that different characters take to this challenge reveal different philosophical strategies for creating authentic meaning within systems that provide no objective foundation for significance or purpose beyond individual psychological requirements and social relationship needs. Rick's scientific pursuits represent one approach to creating meaning through achievement and discovery that transcends individual limitations while contributing to broader understanding of cosmic systems and technological capabilities that might improve conditions for conscious beings, regardless of their ultimate cosmic significance. His research provides psychological purpose and intellectual satisfaction that enable continued functioning despite existential despair, while also creating practical benefits for individuals and communities who benefit from his innovations and problem-solving capabilities without requiring philosophical justification beyond utilitarian improvement of welfare and expansion of possibilities. The family relationships that anchor Rick's psychological stability demonstrate how meaning can emerge through emotional connection and mutual care that transcends rational justification while providing foundation for ethical commitment and personal growth that enables continued engagement with existence despite recognition of its apparent meaninglessness within broader cosmic frameworks. The love that develops between family members creates authentic significance that depends not on cosmic validation but on psychological reality of connection and shared experience that provides motivation for continued moral reasoning and emotional investment in individual and collective welfare. The show's ultimate message about human connection suggests that meaning emerges not from objective cosmic significance or philosophical frameworks that justify individual existence within universal systems, but from the subjective reality of consciousness and relationship that creates authentic experience and genuine moral commitment, regardless of their ultimate cosmic status or logical foundation, within theoretical frameworks that attempt to evaluate significance according to abstract principles, divorced from psychological reality and social relationship needs that provide foundation for actual human welfare and authentic ethical development within specific communities and particular historical circumstances that give concrete shape to abstract philosophical questions about meaning and purpose. The cultural impact and lasting legacy of Rick and Morty extends far beyond its immediate success as animated television entertainment to encompass fundamental changes in how audiences approach science fiction, storytelling, philosophical complexity in popular media, and the integration of intellectual sophistication with emotional authenticity in ways that have influenced countless creators, while also establishing new expectations for animated content that treats viewers as capable of processing complex ideas and moral ambiguity without requiring simplification or comfortable resolution of challenging questions about existence, meaning, and responsibility. The show's influence on animation and storytelling represents a paradigm shift that demonstrated how animated television could address sophisticated philosophical questions and complex psychological themes while maintaining broad audience appeal and commercial success, proving that viewers were hungry for content that challenged their assumptions and engaged their intellects, rather than simply providing passive entertainment or comfortable confirmation of existing beliefs and values. The success of Rick and Morty opened creative space for other animated series to explore mature themes and complex narrative structures that had previously been considered too challenging or uncommercial for mainstream television audiences. The integration of science fiction concepts with family dynamics created new template for genre storytelling that influenced numerous subsequent animated and live-action productions, demonstrating how speculative elements could enhance, rather than overwhelm, character development and emotional authenticity, when properly balanced with genuine human concerns and relationship complexity. The show's approach to using interdimensional travel and cosmic awareness as frameworks for exploring ordinary family problems and personal growth provided model for how fantastic elements could serve thematic purposes rather than simply providing spectacle or escapist entertainment divorced from meaningful human experience. The sophisticated approach to serialized storytelling within episodic format influenced television writing across multiple genres, showing how long-term character development and ongoing mythology could coexist with self-contained adventures that provided immediate satisfaction while also contributing to larger narrative arcs and thematic exploration. The balance between standalone episodes and continuity-heavy installments created viewing experience that rewarded both casual consumption and dedicated attention, establishing an approach that numerous other series have attempted to replicate with varying degrees of success. Memes and cultural references that entered mainstream use through Rick and Morty demonstrate the show's penetration into broader cultural consciousness beyond its immediate fanbase, with phrases like wubba lubba dub dub, Pickle Rick, and various philosophical observations becoming part of common discourse and internet communication in ways that extend the show's influence far beyond traditional television viewership boundaries. These linguistic contributions represent genuine cultural impact that transcends entertainment value to become part of shared reference framework that enables communication about complex ideas through recognizable shorthand expressions. The Pickle Rick phenomenon in particular revealed how seemingly ridiculous concepts could carry deep philosophical and psychological meaning while also functioning as accessible entry points for discussions about avoidance, responsibility, and the relationship between intelligence and emotional maturity that might otherwise remain abstract or intimidating for general audiences. The meme's popularity demonstrated how humor and absurdity could serve as vehicles for serious ideas without diminishing their intellectual content or emotional significance. The Szechuan sauce incident and its aftermath illustrated both the positive and negative aspects of intense fan engagement with media properties, showing how genuine appreciation for creative work could escalate into unhealthy obsession and entitled behavior that reflected poorly on fan communities, while also demonstrating the powerful emotional connections that audiences could form with fictional characters and storylines. The controversy provided important lessons about fan culture, corporate marketing, and the responsibilities that come with creating content that inspires passionate audience investment. Fan community theories and ongoing discourse surrounding Rick and Morty demonstrate unprecedented level of analytical engagement with animated television content. As viewers approach the series with academic rigor normally reserved for literary or philosophical texts, creating interpretive frameworks and analytical methodologies that enhance understanding while also contributing to broader cultural conversations about meaning, identity, and moral responsibility in contemporary society. The depth and sophistication of fan analysis reflects the show's success in creating content worthy of serious intellectual engagement, while remaining accessible to diverse audiences with varying levels of philosophical background. The development of complex theoretical frameworks by fan communities, including detailed analysis of dimensional mechanics, character psychology, and thematic development, represents a new form of collaborative meaning-making that extends creative interpretation beyond traditional academic or critical contexts to encompass genuine grassroots intellectual engagement with popular culture content. These theoretical contributions demonstrate how contemporary audiences can serve as active collaborators in meaning-making processes rather than passive consumers of predetermined messages or themes. Academic analysis and scholarly attention directed toward Rick and Morty represents recognition of animated television's potential for serious artistic and philosophical achievement, with universities incorporating episodes into philosophy, psychology, and media studies curricula, while scholarly publications devote increasing attention to analysis of the show's thematic content and cultural significance. This academic recognition validates the series' intellectual ambitions while also contributing to broader acceptance of animated content as a legitimate subject for serious critical attention and theoretical analysis. The incorporation of Rick and Morty into educational contexts demonstrates how entertainment media can serve pedagogical purposes when content combines accessibility with intellectual rigor, enabling educators to use familiar and engaging material as foundation for exploring complex philosophical questions and psychological concepts that might otherwise seem abstract or disconnected from students' lived experiences. Cultural references. The show's success in educational contexts reflects its achievement in making difficult ideas approachable without sacrificing sophistication or nuance. Research and scholarly publication, focusing on Rick and Morty's approach to existential themes, family dynamics, and moral philosophy, contributes to broader academic understanding of how popular culture participates in contemporary intellectual discourse and influences public engagement with fundamental questions about human existence and ethical responsibility. The serious scholarly attention validates animated television as medium capable of meaningful artistic and intellectual achievement, while also demonstrating how entertainment content can contribute to ongoing cultural conversations about significance and meaning. The controversy around toxic fandom elements reveals darker aspects of intense audience engagement with media properties, as some viewers use the show's philosophical complexity and moral ambiguity to justify antisocial behavior and nihilistic attitudes that completely miss the underlying humanistic themes and ethical concerns that provide foundation for the series' most important insights about relationship and responsibility. The toxic fan phenomenon demonstrates how sophisticated content can be misinterpreted or weaponized by audiences who focus on surface elements while ignoring deeper meanings and values. The misappropriation of Rick's character as role model or philosophical guide by viewers who identified with his intellectual superiority, while ignoring his obvious psychological damage and moral failures, represents fundamental misreading of the show's thematic content and character development, as Rick's behavior consistently demonstrates the psychological costs of cosmic awareness, divorced from human connection and ethical commitment. The toxic fan interpretation of Rick as admirable figure reflects broader cultural problems related to the valorization of intelligence without wisdom and power without responsibility. The creator's response to toxic fandom through explicit rejection of nihilistic interpretations and emphasis on the show's underlying humanistic values demonstrates artistic responsibility and commitment to maintaining thematic integrity despite audience misappropriation of characters and concepts for purposes that contradict the series' fundamental ethical framework and philosophical orientation toward meaning-making through relationship and moral commitment, rather than cynical detachment and intellectual superiority. How the show changed Adult Swim and late-night animation represents institutional impact that extends beyond individual creative achievement to encompass fundamental shifts in network programming, philosophy, and audience expectations. For animated content during traditional late-night viewing periods, Rick and Morty's success demonstrated commercial viability of sophisticated animated programming that combined intellectual complexity with emotional authenticity, encouraging networks to invest in similar projects while also raising production standards and creative ambitions across the animated television landscape. The international reception and global cultural impact of Rick and Morty reveals how philosophical themes and family dynamics can transcend cultural boundaries while maintaining relevance and emotional resonance across diverse social contexts and linguistic traditions, demonstrating that fundamental questions about meaning, identity, and moral responsibility represent universal human concerns that can be explored effectively through specific cultural frameworks without losing broader applicability and significance. The successful international distribution and cultural adaptation of Rick and Morty content, including translation challenges related to philosophical concepts and cultural references, demonstrates how sophisticated entertainment can maintain thematic integrity while adapting to local cultural contexts and linguistic requirements. The global success validates animated television's potential for international cultural exchange and cross-cultural communication about fundamental human experiences and concerns. Merchandise and commercial success associated with Rick and Morty represents unprecedented commercial achievement for animated television property that combines intellectual sophistication with mass-market appeal, proving that audiences will support complex content financially when it provides genuine value and meaningful engagement, rather than simply familiar comfort or passive entertainment. The commercial success enables continued creative development, while also demonstrating market viability of sophisticated animated content for other creators and networks. The future of the franchise and potential spin-offs represents ongoing cultural influence that extends beyond original series boundaries to encompass expanded universe development and continued exploration of themes and concepts that have proven culturally significant and commercially viable. The potential for continued development suggests that Rick and Morty's cultural impact will persist and evolve, rather than remaining limited to its initial creative achievement and immediate cultural moment. Critical acclaim and awards recognition for Rick and Morty validates animated television's artistic potential, while also contributing to broader cultural acceptance of animation as legitimate medium for serious artistic expression and intellectual achievement, rather than simply children's entertainment or niche adult comedy, without broader cultural significance or lasting artistic value. The critical recognition helps establish animated content as worthy of serious cultural attention and academic analysis, while also encouraging continued creative innovation and artistic ambition within the medium. The Emmy Awards and other industry recognition received by Rick and Morty represent institutional validation of animated television's capacity for for artistic achievement and cultural significance, demonstrating how entertainment content can combine commercial success with critical acclaim and intellectual rigor without sacrificing accessibility or audience engagement. The awards recognition contributes to ongoing elevation of animated content within broader entertainment industry hierarchies, while also validating creative approaches that prioritize thematic complexity and emotional authenticity over simple commercial appeal or familiar genre conventions. The lasting cultural legacy of Rick and Morty will ultimately depend not on its immediate popularity or commercial success, but on its contribution to ongoing cultural conversations about meaning, identity, and moral responsibility in contemporary society, as well as its influence on subsequent creative works that continue to explore similar themes and approaches to combining intellectual sophistication with emotional authenticity in ways that engage audiences as active participants in meaning-making processes rather than passive consumers of predetermined messages or comfortable entertainment that requires no intellectual or emotional investment beyond immediate gratification and temporary escape from personal concerns and social responsibilities. As we conclude our journey through the infinite complexities of Rick and Morty's universe, remember that beneath all the cosmic horror and interdimensional chaos lies a profound truth about human connection. Rick's greatest tragedy was not losing his original family, but nearly losing his capacity to love his replacement family. The show reminds us that even in infinite realities filled with infinite possibilities, the simple bonds we forge with others remain the only things that truly anchor us to meaning. Perhaps the real adventure isn't traveling between dimensions or wielding godlike power, but learning to be vulnerable enough to let others matter to us. As you drift towards sleep, consider that unlike Rick, you exist in just one precious reality where every choice carries weight, every relationship has meaning, and every moment of peace is irreplaceable precisely because it cannot be infinitely replicated. Rest now in this singular, beautiful dimension we call home, knowing that the connections you've made today are more valuable than all the portal fluid in the multiverse. Sweet dreams, and remember, Wubba Lubba Dub Dub might mean, I am in great pain, but it doesn't have to stay that way forever.